Hello.
Good evening. Good evening, Pour and Sip.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Jake. You're looking very festive.
Yeah, I mean it's redder than intended, but all the good Christmas decks are downstairs. But
No, I love it.
a pretty good Christmas jumper. It's like a
Is it like a football Christmas jumper?
Yeah, it's sort of like a Dennis Bergkamp 1990s Arsenal kind of affair, but he was called the Iceman. So
that's a lot of like lore that I don't know.
it's top tier Christmas jumper, I assure you. And Andy would love it. He's an Arsenal fan, I believe.
Damn it. I realized that sorry, I don't own anything Christmassy. I feel like wardrobe wise, like I'm a bit of a Scrooge. I was like rummaging around trying to find something. I was like going through my sister's stuff. I was like, oh my god, I have this. I'll go Nordic or like the patterns.
Yeah, it's good. I think we've just interpreted it very different ways. And that's fine.
Yin yang.
Yeah. I can see people are, got plenty of comments coming in. What are people saying?
Is everyone feeling festive? Is everyone got their socks on?
Good evening. Good evening. Yeah, Jonathan Chard, Steve Cole Williams, Chris. Oh, I've got my socks on. One Sip socks.
I love it. I've actually got 2 pairs of socks on, so I can't show you my flat. Everyone's
greetings, one and all. May the drams be with you.
Nice. That could be our slogan.
Oh, someone's box hasn't arrived. Oh, get in touch. Well, I'm very sorry. We'll sort that out for you.
You should let us know before.
Yeah. We've got 5 guests. Jonathan Charles. Yes, absolutely. It's the Christmas special. It's it's how we roll at Christmas.
I can see Jeffster's yet to tuck into the Pour and Sip advent calendar. That's very fun to have that waiting for you as well.
Nice. We've got Pexman's got his socks on. There you go.
Stunning. Good work.
So, I know we have a lot of new members as well. So, we welcomed some of them last month. In the last couple of months, we've had a lot of new members. So,
amazing.
Welcome. Hello. If it's your first time, say hello in the chat. My name's Jake. I've worked at Master of Malt forever, basically. I've given up trying to explain my job on these things, but I'm like a piece of the furniture, essentially, these days.
You're like the hive mind.
And Jess worked with us for many years, and am I going to get this right? She was, in fact, I've got it on another tab, but what's going to happen is going to light up my face.
You've got like my LinkedIn or something.
Essentially, yeah. Well, the mom version. Jess was shortlisted for the IWSC Trophy for Emerging Talent in Spirits Communication 2023, and I think you can, even at the end of 2024, I think you can dine out on that one.
I actually do.
It was fantastic. Let's see. Yes, our first guest is ready. So
amazing.
So I feel like I've just blathered on a whole load there, Jess, but.
Oh my God, no, perfect. I was going to say, if people don't know the order tonight, we are, let me find it. So many comments have already come through. So first up, I will be chatting with Alex about the Glenfiddich. And then second is Bladnoch with Mark. Third, I would have said Carpathian, but it's Carpathian.
We'll find out.
Okay, well, I've had 2 pronunciations. Anyway, third is Carpathian with Allan. Fourth, we've got Lochlea with Patrick, who's coming from his Christmas party, so that's going to be fun. And then last but not least, we have Rock Island with Dougal. So that's the running order. Don't worry, if you've got all your drams with you, there's no need to remember that. But yeah, kicking it off with a lovely Glenfiddich.
Let's bring in Alex.
Yeah, get the guests on, enough of us.
Hey!
Hello!
Hi, guys. Sorry about that slight tech issue. I've gone from my work laptop to my work iPad to my work phone, now on my personal phone. So everything is working well, and I think this is a much better camera as well. So I think I'll be in dire need of a dram after that slight
it's appreciated. It's looking good, sounding good.
Meltdowns, but it's all good. I'm dressed like an elf. I've got my green Glenfiddich jumper on, and I've got my lovely kind of elf hat. So, hi, hey everyone.
But thank you.
Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday. Happy Christmas.
Yes, happy Christmas. I can't believe it's like, what day is it? 10 days?
Less than 2 weeks. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, scary. Have you got all your presents bought?
I wish I could say yes.
Yeah, I'm like 95% done, so hopefully.
Oh wow, I wish that was me. Yeah.
It's nice to be here, guys. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for coming.
Yeah, it's been a nice, like a few months in the making. This I found out about in September, and then just kind of pottering away. So it's nice to be here. 'Tis the whiskey season, which is nice.
'Tis always the whiskey season.
Yeah, I hope you are keeping busy and have enough supply of whiskey to hand.
Oh, there's no doubt, no fear of not being busy around Montels.
I know. Normally for like brand ambassadors, just for context, I'll do a quick intro in a minute. But like normally at this time of the year, I'm kind of winding down and just kind of enjoying times in bars and restaurants. But it just seems to be ramping up. So it's a very thirsty crowd at the moment, which is nice. Yeah.
I mean, keep it coming.
Right. Yeah. Amen.
Well, yeah, I guess before we get into the whiskey, it's always really great to hear a bit about you. So yeah, I mean, who are you? What's your story, and how did you get here?
Yeah. So good evening, everyone. My name's Alex Walker. I'm the national brand ambassador for Glenfiddich here in the UK. I've been with Glenfiddich and William Grant & Sons. I was thinking about this. It's going to be 6 years in March, which is scary. I mean, 18 months of that was during that time when this was very much common. And I was kind of getting flutters of like little bits of nerves because I was talking to myself in a room for like 2 years to no one. And then it's happening again. But I've got you two on the screen, which is nice. So yeah, I've been with Grants and Glenfiddich for nearly 6 years. Bartending background, so I've always been very interested in kind of spirits in general, hospitality industry as well. I kind of started bartending back when I was a fresh-faced bartender, like working in Australia on my very kind of cliched gap year. Kind of fell into the love of like spirits and just hospitality in general. So I've not really looked back, and that was 11 years ago when I first started bartending. So yeah, it's been a good, fun journey, and yeah, very much firmly kind of feet planted within my current role, doing much things like this, and I spoke about before, like restaurants and kind of advocacy, bar, education, stuff like that. So it's a wonderful place to work, and it's a wonderful industry to be in. So thank you for having me. It's nice to be here.
It sounds like you were like used to sort of traveling around before you became brand ambassador, because that's like part of the role. So you were already out there. Oh yeah,
100%. Like I, as you can tell from my accent, I'm not from London and I'm not from Scotland. I'm from the northwest of England, so just outside of Manchester. So I started bartending in Australia, basically when I ran out of money, and then came back. And then I've worked in Manchester, kind of surrounding areas, Warrington, my hometown, and then moved to London in 2016, where I was very kindly offered a job at the Beaufort Bar of the Savoy. So I started my bartending journey in London off to a pretty good start, and then worked there for about 2.5 years under my ex-boss Anna, and then went to Artesian at the Langham to work with her and Remy Savage and people like that. So yeah, I've been doing this current role for a long time now, which is just scary.
Prestigious bartending.
Yeah,
the celebrity name dropping bartending.
Pretty fancy for a guy from the northwest. So yeah, it's been fun. And
you left it all behind.
I started to go grey and started to my relationship was breaking. So I was like, I'm just going to get out of that, and then became a brand ambassador. So yeah, the job role presented itself, and I applied for it. And 6 years later, I'm still here, so I've not done anything wrong yet.
Well, this is recorded, so.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, it's always going to be online now.
So I mean, obviously, 6 years within like the Glenfiddich history is not actually super long.
It's in the grand scheme of things at Glenfiddich. No, I'm not sure how many of your guests that are listening. These are amazing, by the way. Like the amount of detail that you can manage to fit onto a tiny card. If you've looked at this, if you haven't, I'm going to be talking about it anyway, so you don't have to worry about that. As long as your glass is full, that's the main thing. So yeah, actually, this Christmas, William Grant & Sons is celebrating its 137th birthday.
Wow.
So, and ever since that date, since day dot, we have been, and we still are independently family owned and operated. So we're on our 5th generation of ownership, and 6th generation and 7th generation of family members working in the company. So I think just having that kind of ingrained as our kind of like brand promise, our ethos as a company, that's something that really was just fascinating to me when I started to like dig deeper into it. And we have our brand ambassador conferences annually, and we have trainings and stuff, and our archivist, who's called Andy Fairgrieve, every single time I'm in a kind of like a learning setting with him, he always manages to dig something out of the woodwork that I'd never even thought about. So if you don't know, William Grant & Sons, or Glenfiddich, who we work for, William Grant & Sons, we were founded back in 1887 by William Grant. And he basically kind of like had this ethos of wanting to realize his dream of making the best jam in the valley. So he set out to build Glenfiddich. Many of you on the call might recognize this distillery that I'm about to mention, called Mortlach. He worked there when he was mid-20s, worked there for 20 years. Basically kind of building up this like enthusiasm and this love and the craft of making whiskey, so much so that he left when he was 46, 47, and then set out to build Glenfiddich with his 7 sons and 2 daughters. So this whiskey that we're trying, we'll get onto it in a few minutes, I'm sure, kind of started off its life back in 1992, and certain different it's changed kind of naturally over the years, much like Glenfiddich brand has changed. Sorry, my bell's getting in the way. Much like Glenfiddich's brand has changed, William Grant as a company, we've changed. We're always kind of like trying to do, I suppose, the next best thing. Our kind of like innovation, our history, our heritage is all kind of like interwoven in everything that we do. So a brand that's been around for such a long time has got such a kind of like a rich tapestry of history, and we know everything that was going on back on day one or day dot, because William was actually a very well-educated man. His family always kind of instilled or distilled with jokes this kind of like really good sense of work ethic. So very very good education, but also having that kind of like that hands-on, and because he was so well educated as a bookkeeper, we know from day one exactly what was going on back 137 years. So
that's amazing.
Pretty impressive. When you go to the family room at our distillery just above the old malt barn, everything is there. It's all recorded, as you probably can imagine, very scripted kind of writing, these big kind of glossy books. I mean, they're a bit dated now, but we know everything. So that's why we can kind of dip into our archives and all of our kind of like history that we've got and kind of recreate stuff. So we've done one good example of that was in 1963, when we basically created the single malt Scotch whiskey category. We did not invent single malts. That's important to note. People were making it way before us. But Glenfiddich was the brand that basically put single malt Scotch whiskey as a category outside of Scotland or outside the UK Isles, when we entered into America in 1963. And that kind of is the starting point of this. So this bottle, I'm sure
it's the full one.
Naturally, it's spilling out of the cupboards at this house. This kind of like this bottle shape and this bottle design all kind of stems from there, as what kind of like really pinpointed Glenfiddich on the map when we created that category back in 1963. So fast forward 60 years, and we're still kind of forging our own path to this very, very day. So yeah, that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of Glenfiddich, what we kind of stand for, where we kind of are in the world of whiskies. We've got the 4 whiskeys and a tequila, so 4, 5 different spirits, but that's just kind of like where we've chipped our own little kind of stamp into the world of whiskey. So yeah,
that was probably like the quickest summary of like 150 years of legacy that I've ever heard. So well done.
Thank you.
Where to begin? I mean, what you were saying. No, separate point. I feel like I'm trying to digest all of that. So the 18-year-old, where does that exactly fit into that history?
Yeah, so we've been making single malts since 1887. We've naturally changed, as I'm sure most whiskey companies have, and most brands have. For example, we used to be really heavily peated, and we used to be really heavily influenced by European oak up until kind of the mid-40s. So just after Prohibition ends, there was on this kind of trade-off of American oak or ex-bourbon cask coming from America. And basically what we had acquired over 12, 13 years during Prohibition, basically Scotland shut down, or mostly. There was only a finite amount of whiskey distilleries that continued production. So we actually had the foresight back then to realize that, much like when COVID was happening, it's not going to go on forever. There's always light at the end of the tunnel. So we thought back in 1920, what we'd actually do is double production. So over the course of 11, 12 years, we'd had that kind of snowballing effect of whiskey stocks or aged stocks just ramping up at our distillery. So there was a figure on this little card. I'm not sure if your guests have noticed. At the moment now, we've got 43 stills at Glenfiddich, which is just
wild, right?
It's a mind-boggling number of stills. We've got 48 washbacks. We're producing annually about 21.8 million liters of new make spirit a year, and that's just being made. That's not in casks. That's not maturing. That's not going for bottling. That's not in our vattings. That's just being made annually now, or any one time at our distillery, just at Glenfiddich, there is about 1.3 million casks of whiskey just maturing, and that's just at Glenfiddich. You go to Balvenie, it's about a third of the volume of that. And then you go across to the west coast of Scotland, where we have Girvan, where we make Grants. There's about another 1.7 to 1.8 million casks just there. So there's kind of snowballed effect that has just been going on over the course of, since 1930s to 1940s, kind of really skyrocketed Glenfiddich. So 1963 basically created the category with our 12-year-old, or back then we called it a straight malt. In America at the time, there was already a thing called double malt. So if we'd have launched it as a single malt, it might have caused some confusion. And that kind of journey of 12, at some point, most of our whiskies all start with 12. There are exceptions to the fact, like experimental series with non-age statements and stuff. But 18 years is essentially the 12-year-old's big brother. So out of the huge range, and I mean the huge range of Glenfiddichs that have been made over the course of the years. I mean, to give you an idea, this is a Glenfiddich book that was written by our Taiwanese brand ambassador, Jimmy Chan. And you can see here, it's not exactly a small book. And this basically has every Glenfiddich that's ever been made in this book.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, so it's pretty striking that when you look at it, 18 years, we've always had aged stock. We're very, very fortunate being family owned, as I mentioned before. We don't have to give any of our stock away, so we can just keep it all on site and do with it whatever we want. So that story of 12 kind of going into the 1960s and 70s and skyrocketing that into like the year 2000 when we put the number 12 in the bottle. So not a lot of people know that. We only put the number 12 in that bottle in the year 2000. Wow. Prior to that, it was basically an over 8-year-old to a non-age statement to an over 8-year-old. And then going back to like the 60s when we started to define our kind of house style. That's one thing that is really exemplified in this particular whiskey, because it is essentially an older version of 12. So core DNA of Glenfiddich, I say core not by any means, but other than a pun, because core is a main kind of, I suppose, tasting note with Glenfiddich. And that naturally comes from our new make spirit. So you try our new make spirit, maybe knock it back with some water. You try it straight off the still, it basically tastes like pear drops, green leafy notes, fresh cut grass. And then naturally, when you introduce American oak to that, or basically the vanillin kind of compounds that you get from that, that's just going to be heightened. So kind of flavor note wise, I always kind of say that Glenfiddich's house style is vanilla, oak, apples, pears, orchard fruits as a whole. But what's quite interesting about our whiskey and our style of whiskey is that when we're kind of around that 12-year-old mark, We're lovely and fresh and fruity and sweet and rich and delicious. The older that we start to get, so when we're around this kind of age, those flavor notes are just going to be kind of further enhancing up until we get to around the 21 mark, when the sweetness and the richness kind of goes away. And that's where we start to introduce kind of cask finishes with our Grand series, for example. This is what my malt master makes at Glenfiddich. That is his favorite thing that he makes. Yeah. So those of you that don't know, there's only ever been 6 people in the whole history of Glenfiddich that have been responsible for making it. So 6 malt masters over the course of 137 years. The most recent of which is a gentleman called Brian Kinsman. And he joined 2000, 2001, when there was this kind of huge amount of experimentation and innovation happening at the helm of David C. Stewart, MBE, who was the malt master for the Balvenie and for Glenfiddich. So what we start to see is kind of around, I would say that early to mid 90s to kind of eking into the late 90s, this really quite large amount of innovation was happening of what if we do this, what will happen? A good example of that would be in 1980, when the Balvenie, what is now the Balvenie 12-year-old double wood, started off its life as the Balvenie Classic. And that was the first ever cask finished whiskey. On the call as well, very short explanation of what a cask finish is. You take whiskey A from cask A and drop it into cask B for the remainder of its lifetime. And that's essentially just adding a flourish of flavor onto the end without masking the base spirit. So,
because we had the Balvenie Caribbean cask on not that long ago.
Yeah.
Someone will tell me in the comments exactly which month and which box that was in a second. But yes, so we kind of covered some of that, like the incredible innovation that was going on at that time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It was kind of unbounded as well, because there was so much happening. You know, our spirit makers, our whiskey teams are constantly changing and evolving. So we're constantly getting access to, you know, weird funky oak, and we're getting access to these really kind of like innovative spirits from the UK, like Pomona, for example. So some of Pomona we used for the cask finish of our orchard experiment.
Yes, we had that on here, right? Didn't we, Jake? Am I going crazy?
We might have done.
I swear we did, because
it's a cracking dram. It's I would say slightly different, but in a really fun way for Glenfiddich, because you know most people I think have ideas of what Glenfiddich is, and they just think about the one in the green bottle, right? And that's not a bad thing, because that was the one that put us on the map, basically. But what we've done now is just kind of, you know, think further afield, and very further afield with our cask finishes that we've done in the past, and most recently as well, using, you know, Awamori casks from Japan, and using Bordeaux wine casks from Bordeaux. But this, I would say, because we are talking about the 18, is a very good indication of what our older expressions of Glenfiddich and house style really do bring to the actual makeup of the whiskey. So this essentially is the 12-year-old's dad, and then the one that's above from this is the Glenfiddich 30, which are just essentially evolutions of each other with slightly increased amounts of European oak. So this one, I would say, has all the base flavor notes of 12, so vanilla, oak, apples, pears, but then quite seasonally, because we are doing this at Christmas time, put all those flavors and you bake it into a fruitcake, and you're left with Glenfiddich 18.
Nice.
I think it's a cracking dram. Yeah,
I'm going to run through some comments quickly.
Go.
We've had sort of said hello to everyone at the start. There's been plenty of comments. Alex Battersby, he had his socks on, but he's also had some hula hoops and some Mr. Kipling's Christmas slices, so he's getting on the food pairings early.
Oh my God,
I like that. He's opened the Christmas chocolates early.
Steve Coleman Williams, who's got a database of all the previous pour and sip drams, and he's apologizing for not keeping it strictly up to date, but don't worry, Steve, you're doing good work. We've got some other people. Oh, Chris Dagnan, sorry, I don't know how exactly to pronounce it, but he says that my sister-in-law used to be the production director of Glenfiddich. So,
wow,
incredible.
Impressive.
Then people are jumping in, and have been, well, they jumped in a little while back, but Peter Gilmore's getting toffee on the nose, getting those apples, a hint of orange here, and some apricot. We've got Steve Coleman Williams, who's getting the green apples as well, some gooseberry. Also, he was picking up some white spirit there. I don't know if I think
white spirit.
Yeah.
Has he cleaned his glasses out?
Yeah, with white spirit, but
is he doing some arts and crafts before the whiskey tasting?
Real Boingers picking up some citrus and some more toffee, but also some milk chocolate, which is like I get chocolate all day with Glenfiddich 18. We've got chocolate orange wrapper. That's a great note.
Very
Actually,
festive.
that one about marmalade before, that's one thing that I always get from this. That kind of I don't know, the kind of like the chopped up kind of canned orange peel kind of vibe, in like the kind of weird trail mix that you always get at Christmas time. That's one thing that I always get from this.
No, definitely. Jeff's just getting some cinnamon and orange, as well as the toffees. The Dave Walcock's getting a Christmas market on the nose with some toffee apples. I mean, toffee apples is classic, isn't it?
That kind of mold kind of vibe.
Yeah. Christmas cake.
We've got Jeff just saying how much he likes the fire and cane as well.
Yeah, that's a
and then we've got a question as well. So Jonathan Childs is asking, why not release this at a higher ABV or some cask strength whiskey?
Yeah, so we do actually do a variation of this that you can only get in airports. So what we tend to do at Glenfiddich, and what we found, and it's a question that I get asked on numerous occasions, why don't we do, let's say, more higher ABV versions of our stock? And the quick answer is we do, but for UK domestic, we found that kind of across the board, for flavor notes of Glenfiddich, for kind of approachability, to make it easier for everyone to access it, that 40% ABV mark really does kind of just hit home for our flagship range, where we can start to have a bit more fun with ABVs to kind of make different flavors pop. I would say would be with the experimental series. So experimental series, what we found across the board for that is around that 43-ish mark tends to work. And then with a lot of our Grand series, for example, the most recent ones, kind of playing around with some kind of funky ABVs with that, just to make sure that the flavor profile is right across the board. So for us, 40 just tend to work, especially for our flagships, our 12, 15, 18 variations. But the one that you can get in the airport is part of what we have called the Perpetual Collection. So essentially a Solera vatted version of the 18, slightly higher ABV. I forgot the exact ABV, but I would say it's around the mid-40s, if I'm not wrong. So that's vat number 4 of Perpetual. Obviously, perpetual motion, never standing still. That's just how we age our Solera 15 expression, our vatted version of the 15, and then all of our vats, so 1 to 4, only in airports.
Sure. So travel retail. Next time you're in the airport, keep an eye out. Yeah.
Honestly, airport shopping is one of my favorite things to do, because you always find some really weird, wacky stuff in airports.
Yeah.
I said earlier, didn't I? So about Balvenie 14 was September 2024. There you go. So it was recently.
Yeah.
And we also had the 12-year-old in July 2022. See, Steve knows.
Nice. I wonder if I was
saying Glenfiddich never disappoints. Wonderfully smooth, sweet, chocolatey, oodles of fruit. Real Boingers getting dark chocolate and ginger with the green apple. And then a touch of the citrus acidity. Again, it's that sort of tipping point, isn't it, between the freshness of the 12 and the sort of the richness. Yeah.
Yeah, and what you tend to find, or I tend to find anyway, when you kind of get older than this and kind of dip into that 20 to 21 mark, that almost richness and kind of vanilla heavy note kind of goes away, and it almost starts to develop like a slight mineral note to it. So then we can really start to have fun with cask finishes using rum casks and various different bits and bobs like that. But one thing that I just wanted to touch upon, if we've got a bit of time, your guests might have realized that this says small batch on it, but I'm sure the question on everyone's mind is, how can Glenfiddich be a small batch whiskey? So just to kind of contextualize it a little bit and to put some kind of context on that, just for everyone's kind of knowledge, as kind of like a bank of something that you can keep and just kind of bring out your various parties and stuff. So when we're doing big batches of Glenfiddich, we'll be doing batches of 12, for example, about 450 casks at any one time. So if we kind of average that up at 300 litres a cask, it's about 128,000 litres of whiskey at any one time, which is insane. When we're doing batches of the 18, so this kind of goes back to when 18 kind of came onto the market back in 1992, and then we kind of re-skinned it and reimagined it in the 2000s. All the old bottles of this were individually batched or numbered. basically what I'm sure you all know, as older whiskey, as whiskey gets older, there's less of it. So think of it like a painter painting a picture. He's got lots of colors on his palette when whiskey's young, so he's got loads of things to choose from. As whiskey gets older, there's less to choose from. So what we're wanting to achieve with this is a more pinpoint focus in terms of flavor and style when Glenfiddich gets to this age. So when we're doing batches of this, the maximum number of casks that we'll be doing is 130. So each batch will be very slightly different, but always consistent, which is important to note. So yeah, that's just a little bit of a blurb on if someone says, how can Glenfiddich, which is one of the biggest whiskies in the world, be small batch?
Absolutely,
that's exactly how it can for us. So yeah.
Makes me want to do like a whiskey themed pub quiz now.
I mean, that's
definitely one of the questions.
Welcome to my life. This is what I love to do. So yeah, whiskey themed pub nights.
That's really interesting. Oh, because we only have the little drams. So actually,
yeah,
this is a small batch. But if anyone wants to get a full bottle, obviously head to the Pour and Sip store.
Indeed, where you will get a tasty discount and free shipping as always, of course, and a limited edition fancy tube at the moment with the Glenfiddich 18.
Oh, the festive packs, yeah.
Yeah, we got those. So
if you make really good gifts as well, because they're very striking. They're extremely colourful. Yeah.
Love that.
Nice.
I feel like we've barely scratched the surface, but I'm also so wary of time and that we have 4 more guests.
I know. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that tequila as well. So.
Well, it's tequila cask, of course. Yeah. It is all whiskies, but yes.
Oh, sorry, that's what I mean. Yeah, tequila.
He's got a different box.
Yeah.
Surprise.
Yeah, thank you so much. It does just fly by, doesn't it?
I know.
Thank you so much for joining us, Alex. It's been great.
My absolute pleasure. I look forward to having some whiskies with you all soon. Happy holidays. Merry
if
Christmas.
you're able to, drink along and hang there, we'll see you at the end. Yeah.
Thursday's the new Friday. So
yes.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
Oh, always end up cutting people off when you take
I'm just talking to you now.
There's lots more comments coming in, Jess. There's my favourite ones I've just seen though is Ike Montefalcon. That's a fantastic name. Who is new here and learning about whiskey and saying cheers and then having a chat with people saying, where's the bit I was looking at? They've been drinking whiskey since 2018, but this is their first time joining something like this. So they feel like they found their happy place.
Oh my gosh, that is why I love this. Well, welcome. And welcome.
Everyone's welcoming him. So yeah, lovely.
I believe also there was maybe a Pour and Sip meetup since the last live.
Oh, of course, which did get mentioned. So yeah, do let us know how that went. It was a dram bar, wasn't it?
I still need to go there. Let us know how that was, because that's also a lovely thing. Hopefully more members will be joining those. Right, I've already forgotten the order, Jake.
That's all right, I've got it. We're going to Bladnoch next, and I am going to talk to Mark.
Amazing.
Let's bring him in.
Hello. Good evening. Good to see you both. Looking very Christmassy. I not quite as Christmassy as you. I do have my Rudolph jumper on. I was sort of trying to decide on whether to wear this Christmas jumper, which has got the flashing lights on it, but I thought it was a little bit too distracting when we're wanting to sort of like focus in a little bit more on whiskey. So I thought I'd just put one without lights on, and yes, maybe not as bright lights as you there, Jake, but yes, Merry Christmas, and I hope we're all having a merry evening with some fantastic whiskies.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm. I had some slightly different lighting earlier, but it was, although they don't flash in real life, it was really going like flashing in the video. I was like, so I'm basically sat in the dark.
Like,
Make you look like you're in a whiskey disco.
Yeah.
Well, that's an idea.
It was a lot though. It would have been a lot to sit through for a couple of hours.
People would have had sore heads afterwards, not just because of the whiskey.
Mark, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll dive into chatting Bladnoch.
Of course, yeah. So I am the UK brand ambassador for Bladnoch whiskey. I feel compared to Alex who's just been on, I feel like I'm a baby in the brand ambassador world. I've only been working for Bladnoch for a year, well, nearly a year since January I started. But I have been in the whiskey industry for a little bit longer than that. I moved down to London about 10 years ago for university. And when I was sort of like looking for odd jobs in between, whilst I was at uni, I was doing a lot of hospitality, lots of events, and these sort of like event jobs that came up. I was always sort of like drawn to being at the bar where the whiskey was, and almost like anyone that had come up to the bar asking about the whiskey, they'd always come to me, and I'd be like, "Oh yeah, this is the one that you want to go for." And then fast forward a little bit, I found myself working at the Soho Whiskey Club in central London, and I was there for just about 3 years. And when I started, there was the manager at the time. His name was George Mickey, and he said in the interview at the end, final question was, "Now, what is your favorite whiskey?" And by no word of a lie, and I'm sure you'll hear a lot of brand ambassadors saying this, I did actually say Bladnoch. And he was like, "Oh, really?" And he was like, he hadn't actually tried that one at the time. And I did notice, even though they had 650 whiskies in their bar, Bladnoch wasn't there. So
is that why you said it? Really, you just wanted to wind up?
Well, I just wanted to taste some of it, really. But yeah, so I made sure that after George gave me the job, I made sure that he got some on the shelves, and then I was there for about 2 years. And during that time, even as bar staff, we do lots of whiskey tastings that are private, and we take people through a variety of different whiskies, not even just Scotch, but from around the world, whether it's like Irish, American, Japanese, and then we'd usually finish with a peated Scotch. And so, yeah, I think that was where like my whiskey education really came into its own. And then it was maybe about last November, well, a year last November, that our new general manager, a guy called Tony, he managed to get Bladnoch to come down for a tasting, but they didn't have a brand ambassador at the time in the UK. So it was their master distiller, Dr. Nick Savage, who came down, and Tony knew that I was kind of like kind of wanting to work for them, and that it was one of my favorite distilleries. And so Tony was like, "Mark, normally I'll sort of like lead the hosting before we hand over to like the brand ambassador or the presentation, whoever's doing the presentation. But this time I'll leave it to you to sort of like do some schmoozing and ask loads of questions." So after the tasting happened, I was speaking to Nick, and I said, "Why isn't your brand ambassador doing this tasting? Why is it yourself?" And he said, "Well, we don't actually have a brand ambassador." And my follow-up question was, "Do you want one?"
Yeah.
And yeah, so Nick and his team, they were only down in London for about 48 hours. And so they said, "Look, do you want to go for brunch tomorrow, and we can sort of like run you through the brand ambassador role?" And I was like, "Yep." So they pretty much offered me the job the next day. I started in January this year, and I've just been going all around the UK, doing lots of whiskey tastings, drumming up some Bladnoch love. Been to a few away trips to Europe to sort of like whiskey festivals, and I just love whiskey festivals, just sort of like speaking to so many people and from all around the world, just sharing the passion. And even though Bladnoch, it's maybe not got like the same sort of like big name reputation as like what, say, for example, Glenfiddich does. It's really interesting, just sort of like Bladnoch that I've not tasted it before, and converting them as well. And yeah, that's just like a really exciting, fun part of my job. And yeah, I'm happy to be here and happy to talk. We've got Samsara with us this evening. But yeah, so here I am.
Absolutely. We had Vinaya on Pour and Sip in June 2021. So that was when that one was quite new.
Yeah.
And I think we had Nick on the tasting then. But that was that was a while back, and so I think it's worth sort of running through the kind of interesting and colourful history of Bladnoch, I guess, to
Of course, yeah.
where you
So
guys are today.
yeah, so just for everyone who's on who doesn't know a huge amount about Bladnoch, just where we're situated, we are the most southern whiskey distillery in Scotland. We are in Dumfries and Galloway, near a town called Wigton, and we've been around since 1817. So I do believe we are the oldest privately owned whiskey distillery in Scotland, but I think that sort of like chops and changes, depends who owns which distillery at what point. We've not always been independent, and we have had multiple owners over our years, which is probably why our reputation isn't as big as where it could possibly be. So I think that's what we're trying to do at the moment. But yes, so rewind the clocks back to 207 years. It was a family on a farm in Dumfries in Galloway called the McClelland family. It was mainly two brothers. It was John and Thomas McClelland, and they had been making whiskey for a few years beforehand, but it was all illegal at that point. And then license in 1817 to make it legally, so that they decided to turn their farm into more of a distillery. And yeah, with it being a lowland whiskey, the lowlands are known for being quite light and floral, maybe having like those green apple notes, those fresh cut grass notes, quite similar to what our Vinaya, the one that you tasted a couple of years ago. This is the Vinaya here. That one's a sherry and bourbon maturation one, but we're not here to talk about that tonight. So yeah, the McClelland family, they had the distillery for just under, and during that time in the 1800s, Bladnoch did get a reputation for being the queen of the lowlands. And one of the reasons that we got that reputation was because at her peak in the 1800s, we were producing 230,000 litres a year. And during the 1800s, that obviously was a lot of whiskey. And yeah, more than a lot of other distilleries were in the country. Fast forward to the 1900s, things get a lot more turbulent. We were then owned by Dunville and Co. They had us for 30 years, and then they sold us, mothballed us, and then it was almost like every 10 years we were getting a new owner. And when you're getting a new owner every 10 years, obviously that's not really allowing the business to sort of like flourish as a brand. And so it wasn't too sort of like too many mentionable names within that time. And then it was the 1980s, it was bought by Arthur Bell and Sons. Now during that point, Bladnoch was predominantly making whiskey to go into a blend. Now Arthur Bell and Sons, I'm sure you can probably guess which blend that was. You got it. It was Bell's. So again, if you're not making whiskey to go into your own bottle, your own brand, then the reputation of the distillery is maybe sort of like not going to be what it really could be. And then they became United Distillers, and then became Diageo, and then that was in about 1993. And Diageo decided that they didn't need to have a distillery right in the bottom of Scotland in Dumfries and Galloway, so they mothballed us once again. Now, it was two Northern Irish brothers that came over from Belfast. Now, just to give you a little bit of context, where we are as the crow flies in the southwest coast of Scotland, we're actually closer to Belfast than we are to Glasgow. So you got a lot of people coming over from Belfast to sort of like Dumfries and Galloway for their holidays, and that's what Raymond Armstrong and his family did. And they saw in 1994 that the distillery was up for sale. They purchased it. At that point, they were actually wanting to turn it into holiday lets. They thought they could get a lot of money from that, and then I think they saw sense just at how valuable turning it back into a distillery could be, even though it did involve getting a lot of new machinery in. It wasn't just sort of like, yeah, Diageo didn't leave it in too much of a great situation for new owners to come in. So it took them about 6 years to get the distillery up and running. But some fun facts during that time, warehouse number 1, if anyone went up to Raymond Armstrong and said to him, like, we've got this fun idea of what we could do to sort of like help make some money for the distillery whilst we're waiting for the distillery to be properly functioning again, Raymond would usually say yes. So in warehouse number 1, we had 21st birthday parties, we had weddings, we had line dancing classes there. At one point, they even had a full-sized wrestling ring. But one of the most kind of like unique endeavors that they undertook was a record label, which was called Distilled Records.
That's
And
so
they made CDs of musical concerts that happened in warehouse 1, and they also sort of like recorded local musical talent if they were wanting to sort of like make a name for themselves and make some CDs and then go up to sort of like music agents up in Edinburgh and Glasgow. Raymond would sort of like help them out first with like making their CDs for them. And Raymond, they managed to start production again in the year 2000, and it was about 10 years that Raymond had the distillery, and unfortunately, but they went into liquidation in 2010. So 5 years laid empty, and then in 2015, our current owner, who is the first Australian to ever own a Scotch whisky distillery, and we don't hold that against him. We really love that. It's bringing in cultures from all over, and you know what, he's brought in a lot of love and a lot of investment into the distillery. We had to get 4 new stills in the still house. So we've got two wash stills at about 12,500 litre capacity, and then 2 spirit stills at about 9,500. And then we also got 2 new warehouses. So that took us from 12 warehouses up to 14. And then we've also got since then a new cafe, but most importantly, we've got new offerings. So it was 2017. That's when we really did the proper relaunch, and we went from having some of the people watching might have remembered the old style Bladnoch bottles. Some of them were green, just conventional, straight up and down bottles. Some of them would maybe have a picture of a sheep on them, just because, you know what, we're rural, so why not? Let's show that we're rural by having a sheep on the label. Yeah, so the new bottles that we've got, like the decanter style bottles, I think they're very stylish. They're sort of like showing that we're yes, we do have a history of 207 years, but we're also designed for the modern day whiskey drinker. This the Samsara, it was one of the first releases that we did under sort of like David Pryor, our new owner, and with the first couple of years, he had the master distiller Ian McMillan working for him. He's ex Boonhaven, and then in 2019, that's when we got. Dr. Nick Savage was ex Macallan, and he's been working with us ever since. So we've got 14 warehouses filled with lots of barrels, it's plenty for Nick and the team at the distillery. I hope that's kind of summed up 207 years. And
it's so difficult to do, but yes, it has. And I'm dying to ask you more about this particular whiskey, but I don't know if you want to run through any comments, Jess.
Yeah, I mean, I keep feeling like I'm so engrossed in what everyone's saying. I keep forgetting to drink. And then I'm like, I haven't even tried it yet. And I'm just reading everyone else's notes. But this is so lovely. Everyone's tucking in. So we've got, where did people start? We've got Peter Gilmore with vanilla custard and red apples to the nose. And there's something else like heavy tobacco or maybe old leather. I guess that will probably be the wine casks coming in. We've got, sorry, everyone's talking about their meetup as well. So I'm trying to filter through the comments. Jeffster, it's quite oily to me and reminds me of Tunnock's tea cakes on the finish. I don't know what that is.
You never had Tunnock's tea cake?
Tunnock's caramel tea cakes are like quite a Scottish like little tea cake that comes in with like the it's almost like what is the gooey stuff inside it?
Caramel. No,
like a marshmallow.
Well, yeah, it's marshmallowy. It's sort of like it almost looks a little bit like the bottom of a still, a copper pot still, like that sort of like shape.
I like explaining a tea cake in whiskey terms. Yeah,
it's the only thing I need.
I thought I may as well bring it back to whiskey.
Some homework for you, Jess. Hunt down some tea cakes.
Biscuit base, and then marshmallow in there as well. And you also get Tunnock's caramel wafers as well.
Okay, right. This makes more sense now. Good tasting notes. So I was way off. I was thinking like a bread type situation. Okay. Real Boinga gets wild berries, caramel and custard. Steacon Williams, tobacco and fermented raisins. I guess that might also be the wine cask with the fermented raisin. David Wilcock, also fermented raisin. Peter Barrett, lots of flavour, but may benefit from being a bit smoother. Food for thought.
Okay.
Real again, plums, dried raisins, and cream with clotted cream and jam from the top of a scone as a finish. Oh my god! Someone's just sent me a photo of a Tunnock's tea cake. Thanks, guys.
So I've not really sort of like even though like I know you've all got your little notes here as well that come in the packs, but just to talk a little bit about what the Samsara is. So yes, it's a single malt from Bladnoch. It's a non-age statement, and it's matured in a mixture of Californian red wine and ex-bourbon barrels. So those Californian wine barrels that we use are a mixture of sort of like Cab Sav and Zinfandel. So obviously the types of flavour of wine that you're getting there, that will be an influence on the whiskey that we do sort of like get from those barrels. It's probably about 70% bourbon to about 30% of the red wine there. And I do get that point that it's the food for thought about it maybe being maybe a little bit smoother. A couple of drops of water do actually help. And one thing just about the strength that is we do have our core range predominantly for a couple of exceptions. So yeah, a couple of reasons why we do that is we sort of like leave it up to the sort of like consumer that if you do want to have a stronger whiskey, well, there you go, you've got one at 46.7. I know you get stronger, but standard strength for your core range. We allow people to then put water in if they feel like it needs it. With it being lowlands, I do think lowlands are slightly more gentler on the throat as it goes down on the finish. The other regions, they can maybe be just you maybe feel that fiery burn a little bit more in some of the other regions. I think this is a little bit more gentle, a little bit more silky. Yes, we don't any of our whiskies. So add in a little bit of water at 46.7. If you even add in a little bit of ice, at that strength, it should still be able to resist the urge to go cloudy with those sort of like oils and fats forming. So that comment that was mentioned about it feeling a little bit oily, an influence from the fact that we're kills and fats within the whiskey that naturally occur, and it's also natural color as well.
Indeed, and that's it's 46% about there, and you can start doing that, isn't it? And you're just like a shave higher than that, and obviously, do try a drop of water in there, but remember you can always add a bit more water, but you can't take it out.
Exactly.
As Christy used to say.
Yeah.
But
So I think
what I wanted to ask, and it's nice, like we've got 2 red wine whiskies back to back here. So it's going to be interesting to sort of compare the differences. But I'm interested in perhaps like how this expression has changed since, because I think this was your first expression. I think you might have mentioned actually that when in 2017 when it relaunched, and how maybe that it's developed since then.
Yes, of course. So when we first sort of like launched we would have actually been using a lot, even though it's a non-age statement, we would have been using a lot of aged barrels, because we wanted to make whiskey pretty much straight away as soon as we were able to. And the fact that we had whiskey sitting in the warehouses from the previous owners, that was so fortuitous. It was fantastic, and there was a certain amount of Californian red wine barrels from our previous owners, Raymond Armstrong and co. And so we were using what we had then. They would have been aged barrels. But then sort of like trying to blend them together with some sort of like bourbon barrels to get that sort of like flavor that you kind of Samsara, and the flavor of the Samsara wouldn't have changed massively from our first release, but you're right, it would have changed, because what we're doing is we're constantly getting world, and we're constantly getting barrels from California, because the Samsara, it's not just a one-off, it is a sort of like a secure part of our core range. So we're going to be wanting to continue to do this in the future. So with that in mind, we're probably able to put in a little bit younger whiskey, and I think the reason that we did that at the start, putting those older ones in, was just so that we could produce something quickly. It might have not made financially make a non-age statement having some really old whiskey in there, but I think we put it at a reasonable price, and it sort of like kind of got the name of Bladnoch being talked about again. So the flavor, I mean, this Samsara, it was the back in say about the end of 2017, 2018. I was actually back home where I'm from, in my dad's local pub in Broughty Ferry, and I hadn't tasted a huge amount of Bladnoch at that time. It would have only just been the older stuff, and the previous bottles. So the barman suggested, oh well, if you tried this new Bladnoch, it's you're looking, I know you quite like a sweeter whiskey. They do have a bit of a sweet tooth when it comes to whiskey. So he suggested the Samsara, and at that time when I tasted it, I was just like, you know what, it was really unique, really almost quite peculiar, but in a very pleasant way. And it wasn't so much the sort of like the taste when it hits your mouth, it's that sort of like that finish. It lasts. I think it's got a longevity for a non-age statement, and it's one of those whiskies that really does evolve on the palate, and it just made me sort of like want to sort of like go and explore what else the new style of Bladnoch had to offer. And then obviously a few years later you see me on a Zoom call with like how many ever bottles of Bladnoch. So yeah, it would have changed marginally, but we aim for consistency. So yeah.
Yeah, I know. I think Nick was talking to us last time about sort of like seamlessly moving between sort of the old stock and the new stock, and that be a consideration in production, and so yeah, it's all fascinating stuff. Have we got more comments that have come in from people tasting it or asking anything, Jess?
People are agreeing with your water suggestion, actually. Saying it brings out apples and like really smooths it out. No, I thought that was a comment not coming through.
And with the water as well, it's like literally just a couple of drops will actually just do all the
everything.
Brand ambassador comes prepared.
But no, other than asking about difference between old stock and new stock, everyone's just loving it.
Well, I think for me, it's I think the sort of the floral character of the spirit, or what I'm imagining is that with the wine works very well. And I just get, I think it was on the tasting cards, but loads of cinnamon rolls and stuff on the finish. It's tasty stuff. Yeah. I'm like before, I'm sort of conscious of time, Mark, but it has been great to listen to you and all about Bladnoch. Is there anything else you can tell us that's on the horizon?
Just one last point before I do have to leave. Those floral notes that you do get in Bladnoch. It's quite apt that you do get them, because Bladnoch, yes, it's the name of the river, which is one of our water sources, the water source, sorry. But it's an old Scots Gaelic word that means the place of the flowers, which I think sounds quite nice, and it's also quite apt that you do get those sort of like floral notes like running through a lot of the whiskey. Now I don't think I've got the bottle with me. Oh yes, I've got an empty-ish bottle. But in the UK, back in September, we released our 8-year-old double matured. I'll just try and maybe sort of like angle that slightly so you can see the label properly. We released this for the UK market in September time, and it's going to be the global release in January for this. So it's double matured in red wine casks. So if you do like the Samsara, this is almost a little bit like the Samsara on steroids. And if you are familiar with the old 17-year-olds that we had, that was also in red wine casks, kind of not too dissimilar from that. That's no longer a part of our portfolio, unfortunately. We ran out of that one. It was very popular. So this one is very sort of like strawberry jam, a little bit of pine cones, a little bit herbal, and it's very delicious as well. So keep a lookout for this one on the horizon. It's very yummy indeed.
Nice. Thank you very much. If you're sipping along with us, we'll see you in a bit.
Yes, thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Take care. Cheers. Speak to you soon. Thank you.
We need a whole tasting for each whiskey.
I know, yeah. Every guest, you could speak to them all night, quite happily. But we have, another
3.
Another 3, yes. An exciting one next.
We are departing to Romania, everyone. So,
and America, which will be explained in a second. But let's bring Allan in.
I think I'm actually having technical trouble with my camera. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly. Yeah, I could see you backstage, but there you are.
Can you see me?
Yes.
Right, here I am.
Magic.
Sorry, I had to switch over to the mobile phone because the hotel Wi-Fi is not so good. I just think everybody's just crashing it. So I switched.
So everyone's managed. A couple of technical bits beforehand, but everyone's managed to sort of get themselves sorted just before they've come on. So it's all good.
Just to explain to the guests, I'm in a hotel in Washington DC, and I'm a wee bit. It's like 25 to 4 here, so I'm still in the afternoon while you're drinking Christmas drams.
Friday starts.
So you've been. Sorry, Jess, but yeah, I was just about to say that you've been very busy in America.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
so we arrived. We came last weekend. Myself and Dr. Salome who is the owner of Alexandrian Group. We wanted to go and look at some cooperages in Kentucky and look at some third-party distilleries who supply bourbon. And it's for a larger project we have upstate New York, which is a 4 million LA distillery producing 2 million LA of bourbon and 2 million LA of single American malt. But that's one for the future, but it's the reason we're here.
Incredible. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So lots of projects. We're also scouting projects in Japan. So we're looking at sites there. We spent a couple of weeks there last few days. Well, it's actually 3 weeks we spent in the spring and the summer.
So extraordinary. You've been everywhere.
Lots of projects, very busy. Yeah, I really. I'm looking forward to Christmas. If I knew it was going to be so festive, I would have packed my hat.
That's okay. I'm here on like the non-festive side, so I felt very out of depth so far. So
you're the business side.
Exactly. So before we get into the whiskey, obviously you've been all over the world this year, but it'd be great to hear about your story in the whiskey industry before your current role. I mean, what's your story? I never know how to do that question. It's like, tell me about yourself.
It's quite a long history. This year, I think I'm 33 years making whiskey or being involved in the whiskey industry. I started at Lochlea Distillers as a shift technician after qualifying as a young electrical engineer. And basically, it was a very, very small advert in a Glasgow Herald newspaper. And back then, that's how you applied for jobs. It was a PO box number looking for shift technicians. So I sent my CV along and got an interview. And at that time, Loch Lomond had, I think it was just 4 pots and a 5-ton traditional mash tun.
Okay.
And they had just installed quite a large grain distillery. And it was quite unique at the time because it was a continuous mashing plant. It wasn't designed very well. And that's where I cut my teeth on how to make or build distilleries correctly, because I'd seen all the mistakes happen. So I spent 20 years there, shift technician, shift supervisor, shift manager, and then ending up as distillery manager, looking after all the process and engineering projects. So lots of experience in Scotch single malt and Scotch grain whiskey. So that's chapter 1. So from there, I had a short year at Invergordon Grain Distillery for White and Mackay. And I kind of quickly learned that I need to live in a city because, Inverness is really nice in the summer, but during the winter months when the tourists disappear, it's not really for me.
Okay.
So back down to Glasgow, I had a short year as an engineering manager for a well-known biscuit factory. And then over to Ireland, and I did Slane Distillery. So we put the design together at Slane, the Mount Charles family, and we had a package of designs, placed some equipment deposits. But what we managed to do is basically entice Brown-Forman to buy it, which they did. And just at that time, John Teeling was starting up the Great Northern Distillery. And he headhunted me, so I spent 3 years setting up the Great Northern Distillery, basically taking an old brewery and making it into Ireland's second largest distillery. And we were making pot still whiskey, grain whiskey, peated whiskey, double and triple distilled malts. I think when I left, it was making about 1,000 barrels a week, so it's a significant size. I met a mutual friend of the current owner, or was a mutual friend of John Teeling's, and the owner of Alexandrian, and he introduced me to Alexandrian. So I met Dr. Nawaf Salami in Bucharest, in a Bucharest hotel, and he sort of kind of laid out his plans for his whiskey projects. And at the time, I found it really, really interesting, and I liked him. Which is a big plus when you're looking for a job. So I joined the company in 2017, and we started making single malt whiskey in September 2017, and basically just laying down stock and bourbon barrels.
There's some people in the comments saying, "Is this the?" Well, we're going to find out how to pronounce it now. Jess, is this the
I know,
Carpathian? Is it Carpathian or Carpathian, or what's the correct pronunciation?
It's Carpathian. So the Carpathian, or the
there you go, Jess.
Mountains, Carpathian. Actually, I was doing a whiskey event, and I had an older lady come up to me, and she obviously had some whiskies in her, and she says to me, "Where are the Carpathians in Scotland, son?" I was like, "I don't know, in Scotland."
You're like, I've got something to tell you.
I just obviously never studied geography. So as the Carpathians, and the distillery is actually right at the foothills. It's on the plains. We can see the Carpathian mountains in the backdrop. So,
oh, amazing.
Yeah. So 2017, started making distillate, laying down some stock. And 2021, we started a finishing program of different whiskies and different wine barrels sourced around the world, basically.
That is,
so that's 33 years and 10 minutes.
Exactly. I was like, that's quite the journey to sum up. So this is sort of just like a circumstantial thing that you happened to move away from like, you know, Scotch whiskey as well. It was just like ready for something really new.
You know, at the time it was like, well, there was nowhere else really to go in Scotland or Scotch. It would just be another distillery or another smaller distillery. And I always liked the challenge of project works. So new starts, or taking something from nothing and a blank canvas and making something quite unique. And what Romania did offer was there was nobody else made whiskey in Romania before.
Yeah.
So it really, really was a blank canvas. And it had all the natural kind of resources to make a good whiskey. It's got good water, it's great barley, which is quite unknown. The climate is quite temperate, and the passion of a chairman who really, really was, behind the project. And that kind of all the ingredients make a good cake.
Yeah. So what was you just talked about, like the barley itself? Was that a surprise that somewhere else had like what was different about it?
Well, Romania, there's a lot of stigma about Romania, but if you actually go there, you have the main city, Bucharest, but once you leave the city, it's literally the breadbasket of Europe. There's so many cereals growing: corn, barley, rye. Literally any cereal is growing, and they get maybe 2 or 3 crops a year because of the long, long summers.
Yeah.
So there's a big brewing industry in Romania. Here at the distillery, 50 kilometers north of the distillery, is a large malting plant. And the quality of the malt coming from there is perfect. It's ideal for whiskey making. So, all these ingredients. It's not so much, it's quite a low yielding malted barley, but it is very, very high quality. And it produces quite an oily, fruity, there's a little biscuit note in it as well. Distillate that is very, very nice, just as it is.
Yeah.
So if you add quality barley barrels with it, you get a really, really good whiskey.
Well, I think sort of like the quality and flavour from barley over yield is a hot topic in whiskey for the last few years, I think. So yeah,
that's one of the, in Scotland, distilleries are driven by yield. It's a KPI. Some of the smaller guys have recognised that quality matters over the yield, and they're looking for heritage barleys and stuff like that. Maybe barleys have disappeared and trying to bring them back again. I always hear, and when people say to me that 70% of the flavour or quality of whiskey comes from the barrel. So everything matters. Absolutely everything, from the barley to the water to fermentation times to hygiene to the barrel to the people. Everything matters when you make a good whiskey.
Yeah. I guess as well, because like you said, you were given this blank canvas, like, well, one, where do you begin? Like, what
That's
did you,
a good question.
did you have like any sort of brief, or was it like, just see what happens here?
No, well, it was just to make a good quality single malt whiskey. And that is a good question where to begin, because you have to put a strategy in place. Okay, so what you make today, you don't get to drink until 5-6 years time.
Yeah.
So one of the strategies is finding good ingredients, good equipment, and good people. And when you put all them together, you should have, and you steer it correctly, you should have a good whiskey at the end of it. So we have a good team at the distillery. So we have trained up some young engineers to be the distillery manager. We have a really, really good, high quality laboratory. So they're constantly doing the analyticals on the distillate, checking the maturation. So, and we also engage with some Scotch laboratories just to do a double check.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
As a lot of distillers do. They might not tell you that though.
That's the first time I've heard of that.
Yeah, there's some contract laboratories that are very, very well known in the industry, and distillates get sent there and they get checked and QC stamped effectively.
Oh, nice. That's a good little insider knowledge. So what do you think that there's like a core characteristic that you could define Carpathian whiskey by? Like, no matter the cask finish, that there's like some DNA that would always come through.
There is the current one is Feteasca Neagra finish. So what we do is we take select first fill bourbon barrels, okay, and normally it's about 4 years. We let it mature, and because of the temperate climate, it does accelerate the maturation. Hard to gauge how many years it may add on the taste or the quality of the whiskey. But we then transfer it for a finishing cask between 6 and 12 months. But what's unique about the Feteasca Neagra cask is it actually comes from our own winery, which is about 50 kilometres north of the distillery. So literally the cask is emptied one day and we will fill it with whiskey within that week. So it's
That's very extraordinary. Yeah,
it adds a certain element of quality, because normally when a distillery takes, for instance, California red wine barrels, they need shipped across the Atlantic, and by time if it's in the summer months, by the time the containers open, for sure the barrels will have dried. And this is one of the advantages that we have, is that we actually have our own winery. And I take all the barrels that the winemaker doesn't want, and we use them for whiskey. Now, whether that's a finished whiskey or a fully matured whiskey in the barrel, which may be used for blending later. But we also have a peated whiskey. It's a 35 ppm, and that's been released in 40%, 46% non-chill filtered, and cask strength. The cask strength is very popular. It's a really, really nice whiskey.
I bet.
This is a really interesting whiskey, I think, and we've got some tasting notes coming in. But I suppose it'd be interesting to know a bit about the Feteasca Neagra wine itself, right? Because that's a very quintessentially kind of Romanian grape and wine, and not something I know an awful lot about. So how would you describe the sort of the character of that wine, and what's that doing to the whiskey here? Well,
outside of Romania, it's very difficult to find it.
Sure,
I think it's because the Romanians like it so much and they drink a lot of it. There's none for export. It's a very easy drinking whiskey, and it's relatively quite inexpensive. It's quite fruity, depending on how long it's matured in the barrel, but it can be quite light or it can be slightly more complex. Feteasca Neagra itself means black maiden. Historically, where that came from, I don't know. But one of the projects I'm actually working on is that I've taken they call it must So that's when they do the harvest and they basically squeeze the juice. It's called must. And I've isolated some yeast cells, wild yeast cells from the skin of the grape.
Yeah.
And we've cultivated them, and we've produced a commercially viable yeast of and the origins is the grape.
Wow.
Feteasca Neagra. And that should become one of our whiskies for the future.
That's extraordinary.
I believe that is really unique.
Yeah.
Exciting.
What would be
Take
like?
5 years.
Sorry, for someone who like doesn't know much about fermentation, like how would that kind of yeast differ to like, you know, your bog standard yeast? Like, what's the difference in flavour at the end?
Right, so there is lots of different yeast strains out there now. Like 10, 15 years ago, you'd have just got your distillers drinking yeast effectively. Some of it was made for grain whiskey or specialist for grain whiskey, some specialised for malt whiskey, and some distillers would combine both maybe. But now you've got, and it probably comes from the bourbon industry, a lot of the guys are making their own, or they have a yeast strain that is purely something they've developed.
Okay.
And that's something that's probably coming across the Atlantic. But what it does is, like, I don't know if you've ever tasted a whiskey made of wine yeast. You do get the characteristics of the wine, and you actually smell it in the fermentation. So it does it alters the nose. That's the first thing. You do smell, you know, wine notes coming off the actual the wash effectively, and it comes right through in the distillate.
Okay, so it's almost like a double injection of that wine into the whiskey. Like you've got the yeast and then you've also got the cask itself.
Yeah. But one of the reasons for using the Feteasca Neagra yeast is that if the Feteasca Neagra, which it does look like selling very, very well, is that we can always say that we've got Feteasca Neagra DNA in the brand somewhere. For a marketing tool, it's
we had this whiskey on Master of Malt as one of our whiskies of the month a little while back. My colleague Adam picked it out because when we first were stocking it, because it's just so it's Romanian, and then this Romanian wine finish, and just tastes very.
We're actually going to take it a stage further. Where myself and the owner of the company are just back from the Czech Republic and Slovakia. And we were looking at malting plants there and talking to some equipment suppliers. So what we're going to do is put in our own malting house, and with a facility to smoke or make peated malted barley using Romanian peat, because there's some Romanian peat bogs around.
Sure.
We need to get somebody to go and cut the turf effectively. But the peated whiskey will, provenance matters in whiskey, and people do ask, well, right, so where does the barley come from? Where does the peated malt come from?
So let me catch up with some of these comments, because there have been loads coming in. So obviously people are like, oh wow, a Romanian whiskey, and then so Chris has jumped in. He's finding like a slight bitterness on the nose, which I think it's there, but no bad thing. Steve Coleman Williams, he said he was struggling to pick out notes, and saw on our little tasting cards we've got some tomato stem is one of the ones that we've used, and they were like, oh wow, that's pretty well. They're saying that this is it's like walking into my old man's greenhouse actually. Like I get it. And then some agreement there. Then sweet fruit cocktails. Then very fruity. David Danielson water. He says this is a wonderful find. He's adding it to his list for Santa. We've got people are saying this is quite different, but very nice. Ike, who said this is a beautifully developed whiskey that I loved on the first sip here. They've actually said they tried it at an event as well, and even won a bottle of the peated that you were talking about. So that's cool.
All right.
Other people are getting clove, and then like some syrupy fruit and banana. Someone's going chef's kiss. Mwah. Yeah, so they're loving it. someone's getting Peter Burrett's getting some black pepper, and
definitely.
Saying Tari almost like a heavy stout note as well. Which
I think that some people tell me they get a kind of barbecue note. Somebody told me they got a barbecue pineapple note. So there is a kind of slightly kind of smoky element there in the background. But pepper and cloves definitely on the nose.
Yeah.
It's got a lot fruitier since I poured it. Like when I first smelled it, I was like much more herbal, and now I'm like, it's almost changed so much. Like it's got that more estery. Like I understand the banana note now because I'm like, oh no, I do actually like see that.
Yeah, given some time to breathe.
Yeah.
All the whiskies are they're non-age statements, so they are still a new brand. But in the last year, it's taken 44 awards from all the major competitions.
Wow.
And in total, it's about 70 awards. For instance, one of the finishes, Bradiano, took a double gold in San Francisco, 98 points.
Wow.
And it's scoring 95, 96, right across the board for most of the finishes. So we're very, very proud of that.
Yeah. I think it's sort of like surprising people as well, like just from the comments here, like very pleasantly surprising people. But like, I don't think this is like any whiskey I've really tried. So I guess like everyone's always looking for something new, and this is definitely it.
Definitely one of them. Yeah. It's quite. It is a different whiskey. You're right. And whether you like it or you don't, but for me, I think it's quite a nice whiskey, and most people do like it, and they always find something different on the nose and the taste.
Mm-hmm. I find it quite refreshing in a strange way. I don't know if anyone else is finding that.
Well, what you said, if you let it rest in the alcohol, because it's bottled at 46 non-chill filter, you let it rest a little bit, you start to get the fruity notes and the kind of nice, cloves and black pepper and stuff like that coming through.
Yeah, it's really lovely.
Maybe add some water or a block of ice. It just opens it up.
Lovely. Do you have a secret favorite from the range, or is that a ridiculous question?
No, it's a good question. But everybody asks me that. It's like your children,
Yeah, that's literally it's like. Yeah, you want to ask the question that no one wants to answer.
No, but I do. I quite like the peated whiskey. It's a nice one. We sourced the malted barley from Belgium, and they use Islay peat, Scotch peat. So it's got a lot of kind of Scottish kind of peated characteristics of it. So I quite like that. The cask strength is really nice.
Oh yeah. Will you move over to solely Romanian peat once you have it?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question actually. No, I don't think so. I think we'll keep what we have because it is working. It's nice.
Yeah.
And we'll just check the development of the new peat when it comes through. For instance, I've just ordered two trucks of 40 ppm malted barley, phenols. So that'll be quite a nice whiskey. So it's a little bit heavier. But when I took the 35 ppm, I was like, the Balkans and Romania are not ready for this. But anywhere we go, people love it. They drink it.
Yeah.
So for export is great.
I love that. Amazing. I again feel like we've barely scratched the surface, but it is somehow already 9 o'clock. So hopefully we'll see you at the end if you are able to hang around and sip along with us. Oh no, you don't have a box. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
You're in the US because so together.
I'm in the US. I need to go to an event at 6, and it's 4 o'clock here.
That's very fair. Well, yes, if you can't stay on the line, then thank you so much for joining, even across the pond.
Thank you for having me.
It's so interesting.
I hope all your guests have a nice Christmas and Merry Christmas to you guys.
We've had one person just say Alan could talk to us all night. He's so knowledgeable. So
probably could. I'm trying to condense it.
It's difficult. It's not easy.
Yeah.
And if I had a couple of whiskies, you might be chucking me offline.
We'll have to get back for a survey.
Thank you so much for joining us, Alan.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Really interesting whiskey, and yeah, it's brings something different to this box, and yeah, thank you. It's very tasty.
Thank you. Thank you. Cheers. Okay,
Cheers.
bye-bye.
Thanks so much.
So there we go, two sort of red wine cask whiskies back to back, but
Absolutely
so different.
So different. You were like, oh, I got 2 red wine, and I'm like, oh my god, that's not what I was expecting. You know?
No, it's I mean they both work, but they're just both very different from the sort of like the fruity floral, and I guess that's like Zinfandel casks and stuff, right? So it's completely different wine as well as, you know, obviously
the great
Romanian one. They've got the choice of their own, you know, all these great. I think they're one of the biggest wine producers in Romania.
Yeah,
so they just have all these casks to hand. Extraordinary.
Yeah, the pick of the bunch.
Well, let's keep moving. And we're
off to
Lochlea,
Lochlea, I believe.
Yes.
This
I'm
is
like sat in the
exciting.
dark here, like I say. So I'm like trying to like move glasses and things around. I'm like, is that the right one? No. Okay. Here we are.
I'm like, it's like alchemy.
All for the Christmas background.
Oh my god, hi.
Hello. So we have 2 people. We have 2 guests all of a
This is
sudden.
amazing.
But can we hear you? That's the question.
We cannot hear you guys.
So
Hello.
Hi.
Yes.
Yes, you're back.
There you go. I was
so
just saying,
sorry, we're
I'm
joining you
joining
perhaps a little bit
exclusive.
later than
It's
later than you're
it's possibly
expecting,
the
but
first
it's-
whiskey tasting that has taken place in the midst of a staff night out. But it's to your benefit because I managed to drag along the glorious Emma Kirk to the tasting. So you've got 2 for the price of 1 this evening. Whether that's a benefit or a detriment, I'll leave you to decide. But we're both here. We found some Christmas hats, and we're looking forward to talking some Lochlea.
Thank you for like leaving the Christmas party for us. Feel very,
That's okay.
very honoured.
Not at all.
Sorry, it's not
Also,
my
this
glamorous
is-
location.
Yeah.
This is also so fun because... Oh, sorry, carry on.
No, it's all good. It's not
I was going to say, this is so fun because I started the year in January by visiting you guys at Lochlea on a trip. And then I'm like ending the year with another one. It's not quite the distillery. But...
One of very few people to have visited Lochlea. We're not open to the public at the moment, so it's always nice. We always enjoy it when we get to, welcome people to the distillery and show them around.
But yes,
You're
you're
very
very
good.
good. Our Christmas night out.
Yeah.
Hence our lovely festive hats. Apologies for our location. It's not very glamorous. We're very glitz. But one of our customers' offices.
No, that's perfect. I think there's a little bit of like a slight delay, but we'll run with it. It's
That
all
Glasgow
good.
time difference.
Yeah. So yes, we have Lochlea on their Christmas party joining our Christmas party, which is
There you
pretty
go.
mega. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us. But yeah, I introduce yourselves quickly and tell us a little bit about what you do. I'm very excited to jump into all the Lochlea questions as well.
Of course. Can you go first?
You go. Ladies first.
Oh, ladies first. Well, naturally. My name is Patrick. I work for, in case this wasn't already obvious, Lochlea Distillery. My role basically is to cover the majority of our retail customers in the UK. So I'm out and about doing tastings and events and bringing on new customers, etc., etc. Basically spreading the word about Lochlea and whiskies and enjoy them. Cue Emma.
I'm Emma. I'm the trade sales manager for Lochlea. Similar to Patrick, I cover all of the on-trade of the UK, export, events, brand collaborations. We're obviously a very small team, so we're quite hybrid in what we do. So we work really hard to grow our lovely brand. It's 6 years old this year, so yeah.
Well, yes, of course. So, I mean, I think your first whiskey came out in, was it 2022?
Yeah, January
Is that
25th,
right?
2022.
There we go. And we've had, we had our barley on Pour and Sip in August 22. And then we also
Excellent.
had one of the sowing crop releases in
Absolutely.
October 23. So yeah, even though only been around for a few years, this is the third Lochlea pour and sip appearance. So
I'm gonna say we are prolific, if nothing else.
I mean, our company motto is "Dare to be honest and fear no labour." So we're honest about what we do, and we work bloody hard. That's basically what that means. So we're a small.
But yeah, we ask you back because we love you so much, and I think sort of some of the members will know from before perhaps, but we've got lots of new members as well, and we obviously go through a lot of whiskies on pour and sip anyway. So let's have a nice reminder. But yeah, we started the evening with the best-selling, biggest distillery in the whole country, right? So sort of explain how things were a little bit different at Lochlea.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are by no means the biggest distillery in the country. In fact, we're one of the smallest. We are an independently owned family sort of farm distillery down in the lowlands of Scotland. And to give you kind of notes on a postcard, the thing that makes Lochlea very unique, especially in the Scotch whisky, fact that we grow the entirety of our barley supply on our own farm. The name Lochlea, as in Lochlea whiskey, it comes from the farm that we're based on, Lochlea Farm. We use roughly 180 acres each year to grow our barley. That barley then goes straight into Lochlea whiskey. We don't sell any, we don't buy any in, which allows us to keep, for a start, very good traceability over our ingredients. It also means that we kind of naturally reduce our carbon footprint. Jess will attest, having visited the distillery, poet didn't know it, Jess will attest, earlier in the year. We're growing the barley on site. Of course, all the distilling happens on site. Every cask is filled on a Wednesday on the farm, and all the warehousing is on site too. And we actually do have plans in the very near future to bring the entirety of malting. We do some ourselves. We will do more. In fact, we'll do all of it in the future. And
hopefully by the end of next year.
And we also plan to bring the bottling operation on site as well in the future to become, touch wood, the only fully all-encompassing whiskey production in Scotland. We're already one of only two that grow the entirety of the barley, so we're already very much in rarefied company. But we want to go a step further, and that's really the goal for the Lochlea kind of project.
To be the only single site distillery in the whole of Scotland is basically what we're striving towards.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going for.
Which is an extraordinary thing. I think that's when people talk about grain to glass, or whether it's in Scotland or other countries, it doesn't literally mean every single step happens on site, but you guys are getting there, right? I think last time
sorry.
So yeah, it's like that delay. I think last time you're on, I think you were just doing floor malting trials. I think you're hoping to get like a bottling line and maybe some more.
Yeah. We do a kind of to be fair, actually we do good amount, 20% of floor malting on site. At the moment, it takes the form more of kind of trials, so we can see what problems we run into, and also how does it affect the spirit, because that's obviously an important consideration going forwards. But we are making strides towards having our own malting operation on site, as Emma mentioned. Hopefully that'll be up and running. The bottling line, of course, is something we want to add in the future. It's an expensive thing to bring in, but once you've got everything up into the bottling, the kind of completionist inside you probably says you don't want to be going out and saying, we do everything except we don't bottle it. So we need to add that in there to get the full suite. And then I did have some guests at the distillery a few months ago who said, well, once you get the bottling line, you'll have to have a glass making facility on the site so you can make the bottles. And I said, and this is probably
your beach is over there.
That's the owners of the company. I would hate for them to have that conversation, because I could genuinely see that being added in the future. So let's not give them that idea. Hopefully they're not watching. But in fact, I know they're not, because they're probably in the pub. They're in the pub about 100 yards down the street. But so we're making great strides, and it's ambitious. Of course, there are risks involved, but I think it's a really like worthy idea and something that's worth pursuing. And I'm excited to see how we get there and what we can do from here.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's created a lot of buzz, a lot of interest. I mean, we've really enjoyed talking about it on previous Pour and Sips. And I guess again, like maybe a bit of a refresher here, but you've got sort of like a core release and then like seasonal releases, right? So do you want to talk members through that?
Yeah, of course. So you've obviously had a few of the drams on your previous broadcasts. Our signature core range product. For anybody that's wanting to try Lochlea and just kind of see what it's about, this is a really good one to try. It sits right in the middle of our flavor spectrum. It's one the entire team was involved in sampling and coming up with the recipe for. So even though it's our kind of like entry level product, it's actually the one that we've spent the most time on. And probably one of the ones we're the most proud of. I think
it's where it's helped us get to where we are today as well.
Yeah.
Like the quality, we've won multiple awards for it over the last couple of years, and me and Patrick said it's like our little baby because it's let us grow up. Like, I know that sounds really silly, but I know you may not say that, but in my head it is my little baby. It's allowed us to grow the brand. Like honestly, there's so many people you meet that they say, "Oh, I don't like whiskey," and then they'll try our barley and they'll go, "Actually, I really love that whiskey." And it's like, see when you manage to do that, it's lovely to see.
100%. We also have the seasonal releases, which kind of touch on what we're trying this evening. So when we were first getting going, we knew we needed to have a core product, which would be our barley. We also wanted to have a kind of vehicle for displaying the spirit in some different ways. But we wanted it to link back to the whole idea, the ethos of being a farm distillery. We didn't want it to be like really abstract and kind of related to what we're actually doing as a site, because what we're doing is so unique. So we wanted to bring that to the forefront of the kind of concept. And so what we decided to do was to do what we call the seasonal releases, which is one release for each season from spring, spring, summer, autumn, winter. But we name them after what's happening on the farm at the time of year. So for spring, we have the sowing edition, when we sow the seed for the barley. For summer, we have harvest. For the autumn, we have the fallow, which is the one we're trying this evening. And to go a step further, we wanted the flavours that were present in those particular whiskies to kind of represent that time of year. So, to draw focus on the one that we're sampling this evening, which is a bit of a team favourite. The fallow is our kind of sherry expression. Emma and I have been out wandering around Glasgow this evening. Let me tell you, it's not that great weather-wise. Certainly not the Costa del Sol. It's quite cold. It's a wee bit dank. It's dark. These hats are not in touch. So what we want, you want something warming. You want something a wee bit cozy, a wee bit cuddly, something that's got a lot of flavour, that's rich. And the fallow edition for us is absolutely spot on for this time of year. Something you can sit down, hopefully in front of a nice warm fire or something, and enjoy a richer dram.
For me, fallow is a perfect hibernation dram. It's we always release it around the end of October. So if anyone has been to Scotland around the end of October, it's when the clocks go back. Miserable, it's great, it's cold, it's wet. All you want to do is shut the curtains and curl up in the ball with a good dram. And in my opinion, fallow is perfect for that. For me, it's a sherry bomb, as we call our fallow, fully matured sherry whiskey. But
absolutely. So to get on to the kind of the cask makeup for this one, it's entirely sherry, as we've kind of mentioned. It's a combination of Oloroso and Pedro Jimenez sherry, both coming from the same source. So one of the things, we're getting up and going, one of the things that we really like to focus on is the origins of our casks and the quality of the casks that we fill. It really pays dividends, especially at our kind of stage, to really focus on this and make sure that you're not filling really high quality spirit into really rubbish wood. So we've been very picky with the casks that we fill. Now, for our sherry casks, we get the entirety of them from Miguel Martin down in Jerez, and unique to Lochlea potentially. All those casks come direct to us. Everything is filled on site, and everything's warehoused on site. So what does that allow us? Well, it allows us to get high quality casks that are fresh, that are filled quickly while they're still fresh, so they don't sit around drying out, which is a bit of a, that's not what you want at this stage. And then they're in the warehouses where we can keep an eye on them. And then the beauty of it is, when we come to select the casks that we want to use, we have access to every single cask that we filled to date. No casks leave Lochlea while they're maturing. So we can choose the finest casks that we have maturing. We can combine them in ways that we want, and we can produce, a whiskey which.
But also allows us to do like really good whiskies at a really young age.
Yeah.
Our high quality new make going into high quality casks, age them to 3 to 5 years. We're getting a peak whiskey, and that's where I think it comes into play. And Fallow is one of the ones that, and I take, you'll always hold up and say this kind of highlights the quality of the cask we're using because of the colour of it. Obviously, you can't wait 4 hours here, so it looks quite a lot lighter. But if you have purchased a bottle of Fallow, it looks it's like.
Or if you do purchase one.
Or if you do.
Indeed, with a tasty discount from the Pour and Sip store.
Oh, it's
Subtle plug.
Yeah.
It's like it's the colour of Coca-Cola. It's insanely dark.
Yes, it's a rich hue.
All natural.
But it's all natural.
Exactly, and
colour.
yeah,
Fake-
absolutely
fake
natural.
Coming
Yeah.
from the cask, So for me, it really highlights the quality of the cask that we're using, and yeah, it's a beautiful dram for this time of year.
So we probably extrapolated slightly on your original question there. But
That's fine. That's fine.
Perfect.
We've sorry, Jess, I don't mean to interrupt you. Were you about to hit some comments?
Like the politest we've ever been. Everyone's like, no, please you. But yeah, I actually was going to say, we've got some questions. We've got some notes coming through. First question is Steve asking, where's the rest of the staff?
They're
want
at
more.
Flight Club playing darts right now, and they're going to win.
That's a
I
great
tell you
Christmas
what,
party.
you're in a sense you're lucky because you have exactly 1/7 of the Lochlea team here this evening. We have 14 people in total, so this is actually
Oh, 12.
Estimated
well,
the
sorry,
first
so you're
half party.
1/6 of the Lochlea staff. So yeah, most of the staff are 200-300 yards up the street playing darts, probably
So
quite badly.
We're having dinner, and me and Patrick came.
Yeah, most of the staff are getting a night off.
What's that?
I was like, most of the staff are getting a night off.
Yeah, the sales team.
No, it's just these two are working. That's all.
Exactly.
That's
No. The second question.
There's
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
such a delay, so carry on.
I was going to say the second question is Steve again judging you for having a Corona and a whiskey at the same time.
Do you know what? It's been a long evening. Certain choices have had to be made, I'm afraid. So, do you know what actually is? This is slightly off topic. I recently watched the whole thing about Fast and Furious and they were drinking Coronas, and I've been craving a Corona ever since. So we ended up where we are.
The time
The
is
good thing is we all programs that you guys have provided with us. Thanks
It's
very
our
much
Christmas night out.
to Jake for sending them up to us. So we've been enjoying all the programs
yeah.
previous.
no judgment here. And the third question is a bit more related to what we're talking about, and it's also Steve confirming that this is unpeated or unsmoked.
Unpeated.
It is.
Yeah. So we don't produce peated spirit at all at Lochlea. So there's only one SKU out of our whole range that we do that is we would call smoky rather than peated. So ploughing edition is our we've released ploughing first crop, ploughing second crop. We've still to release ploughing third crop, and that's us putting our unpeated spirit into ex-Isla casks. Now,
Okay, so
it's a specific Isla distillery that we use. You're welcome to say.
Well, what I would say is, technically speaking, we're not allowed really strictly to say which distillery these peated casks. However, what I will do is fill you in with some background on our company. Now, until recently, we were working with the inimitable John Campbell, who has now made the very wise decision to move from Ayrshire to California. John's previous place of work was Lefroy Distillery. Now, you might hear that name come up a few times.
So we'll let you guess.
Yeah, for nearly 30 years. Also, our boss, David, used to work for Beam Suntory, owners of Lefroy, particularly in their cask. And just to carry on a certain theme, Lefroy is emptied into bottles 40 minutes north of us in Glasgow.
Some very interesting incidental facts.
Are these things related? Who knows? But
Couldn't possibly say.
are freely and widely available. So yeah, this one in fact is not peated, and as Emma said, we don't create any traditionally, what would be traditionally called a peated spirit. The way we have the kind of somewhat peated dram, which is our ploughing edition.
It's smoky.
It's smoky, yeah.
It's
It's really tricky because it's like, if you were describing the flavour, you'd be like, well, it's peaty, but like technically it's not actually a peated whiskey. So it's a kind of a bit of a hybrid.
Reason kind of being is we strive to basically use all the ingredients on the farm for
Yeah.
our whiskey. Our water source is an on-site water source. We grow all our own barley. We distill, mature, grow everything on site. For us, then kind of import peat, it just doesn't quite work with it. However, we can do it by using peated cans. So
We work around it.
Indeed, yeah. It's an elegant solution, isn't it? So I think you've got.
it's also
If I'm right, that's the
and recycling.
yes. So you have there's the ex-peated cask is what the winter. You've got the bourbon and port. Is that your spring and summer, or
Yeah.
the other way around? And then obviously this is
right.
the autumn, which is the 100% sherry. Yes. And this is that we're tasting is the second crop, I believe.
Yeah.
And now you're actually onto the third crop of this
We are.
whiskey now.
Just
but-
a quick note. So second, just for people that may have not come across us before, what we mean by first, second, third crop, basically it's like first year releases, second year releases, third year releases. So we've been releasing whiskey now for pretty much 3 years. This Fallow Edition is from autumn last year. That's where we wanted basically like batch 1, 2, 3. So we kind of came up with this like slightly tweaked version, which was like first crop, second crop, third crop.
It's also a way of like going into the farming.
Yeah, well, this is it. So yeah, it kind of links back to the farm a wee bit more. But yeah, just as a wee aside, in case anyone's like, second crop, what does that mean? That's what I mean.
Well, it's an interesting one because so is it literally just? I mean, does that relate to that year's crop of barley as well, though? So does it change from year to year?
It's the previous crop. So like this is like it does get a bit confusing to be honest, but
Well, no, that's fine, but it's still like
example-
sort of a crop at that time, and then maybe like the next crop is literally another crop.
yeah, so the previous year's crop is what got like harvest first crop, harvest second crop was always a previous crop, if that makes sense, because we obviously
Gotcha.
harvest.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's
August,
the previous
September.
year's crop, but it's
Then we're
still.
not- Yeah.
Yeah, it's more the crop of releases rather than the
Yeah.
crop from the farm. That being said, it probably does like loosely fit into the farm because we tend to release the kind of oldest spirit we have at the time, but that
It's
wasn't
the
really
same
the
crop.
cause.
We only use
Yeah.
laureate barley, so there's only one crop on the farm. That
Yeah.
it's a bit confusing.
It's a bit confusing.
No,
No,
that
I
is-
think
Hopefully
yeah,
that's
I
cleared
think
up
we've
for
just
absolutely
about got
nobody.
there, haven't we? Because it's like you're saying, it sort of ends up being the oldest release, so it does kind of reflect. But yeah,
Yes.
because the reason I
That
ask
wasn't really
is
the idea.
because
Basically, if you just think about crop as our way of saying year.
Year 1 release, year 2
Yes.
release, year 3 release.
the reason I was asking is because I know other second crop releases had kind of a honeyed note through them. And I didn't know if that was like quite second crop specific, or because I think like that's what I'm getting a lot of here, as well as all the wonderful sherry notes.
Yeah, well, you know what it is? It's like it's really interesting to be a young distillery, because you see these, you know, we're still learning the spirit, we're still understanding types, and so we are, you know, we're finding these different things as time goes on, and so you do see this development in spirit as we go through the crops. I would say the one that this is most evident in is the sowing edition. The reason being, that's the only one we don't play with the cask makeup for. So sowing edition is always just bourbon casks. So it's just purely older from year to year. And you see this kind of transition in flavors. The fallow, to be fair, cask makeup has changed slightly from crop to crop.
I would say this one is the one we've played most with.
Yeah, we probably mucked about the most with this one.
So fallow first crop was all Oloroso sherry, about 3.5 years old. Fallow second crop, 55% Pedro Jimenez, 45 Oloroso, about 4.5.
Yeah.
And then we've just released fallow third crop, which is all Oloroso sherry again, and about just over 5.5.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so of the
If
three
you're
releases,
actually
we've got like the one that's got a big PX influence as well, so it's a bit unique in that respect.
apart from Cask, actually, this is the only release that we've got that has got quite a heavy influence of PX in it.
Yeah, the thing is, one of the things that we've always endeavoured to do is, especially when it comes to like sherry, PX, and to an extent peated casks, for us, we want to create a really identifiable like flavour profile, which is Lochlea. And certain cask types are more, you know, you have to balance more than others. Sherry casks, of course, are quite active and quite full on, and they add a lot of flavour, which is great. But you don't want it to be you don't want it to totally stamp all over your own flavour profile. So with these ones, we like that sherry influence, but we do try to keep a kind of underlying Lochlea.
Well, we never
theme.
want the cask to overpower the
Exactly.
distillery character.
It's really
So
important.
The cask has to complement our juicy fruit and like biscuity, like new meat character.
Yeah.
Hopefully, as fans of Lochlea, you'll see that always comes. You know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so you've got that fruity and cereally character, right, in the spirit.
Bang
And then
on,
I've seen Mark from Bladnoch in our little private chat here has said, you know, this is very cereally and very delicious. I want some more. Go Lowlands.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, absolutely.
and
Well, the
I'd love to
cereal is
see.
something that we really wanted to. Sorry, the cereal is something we really wanted to come through just in general, because, you know, we talk. Emma will attest to this, and like probably an unhealthy amount about barley and the farm, and so to have that cereal taste come through in the final product, like ties everything together. We literally have our core product is our barley.
Yeah.
So we want to have a barley flavour in there. So anytime you pick up anything, I always say to people in tastings, like, people are not typically going out and eating barley, so they don't necessarily know what I mean by a barley flavour. There probably are some people, but you know, this is a minority. When it tastes like kind of bready or biscuity or like
our boss, but it tastes like granola.
Granola's a good one.
He loves granola, but that's what he says. It's like, you know, you've got that like fruitiness and the kind of cereal, and there's a sweetness.
I think it definitely comes through, which, you know, with so much sherry is obviously, you know, it's pretty impressive. You know, because it's melts
That's what
together
we
very
try to
well.
balance those things.
I want to know what the members are thinking, Jess. What tasting notes have we got coming through?
I was just looking through. We've got someone, Alex Battersby, confirming that the Mr. Kipling's Christmas slice is pairing very well with this dram.
He's
So
still got some slices. That's good work. Yeah, this will be the one, surely.
yeah, exactly. Peter Gilmore, dried fruit and treacle on the nose. We've got Real Boingo with cinnamony dried fruit, gingerbread fruitcake with honey, and Christmassy fruitcake on a gingerbread finish. There's so much like ginger coming through for everyone. Peter Gilmore, ginger and marzipan, and a hint of coffee on the palate with brown sugar finish. Steve Coleman-Williams is saying it's oddly smoky on the nose with golden syrup. I don't know what the smokiness would be. I guess maybe it's just like really rich. I don't know.
Potentially, yeah.
I think
Do you know what? I
sometimes you
find
get
with some
that.
of our drams that people do pick up like a wee bit of smokiness, but there is no pieces stuff in there. I don't know where that really comes from. I personally don't pick it up, but like I've had enough people mention that like it must be a thing, but I personally don't get it.
Yeah, I've had that before where like I've been convinced something's smoky and it's not.
Yeah.
So there's me. I'm thinking this is like a sherry crossover kind of note coming in, but maybe it's like a biscuity, malty kind of edge note
Could
that's
be.
just some people perceive a certain way. It's interesting.
Yeah. I have to say I don't usually
like
go for like a
taste.
sherry.
Sorry.
No, please carry on.
Yes, no, you go.
No, I was just gonna say I don't usually like love sherried whiskies, but like I absolutely love this. And that was my hot take. Please carry on.
It's actually similar to what I was going to say, to be fair. So. Well,
Okay.
cheers, everybody.
I was gonna say, everyone's so cautious of interrupting each other. We're like, But yeah, everyone's saying it's a lovely sherry dram. We had a question about the difference between this and the third crop fallow edition, but I think we might have covered that just as the question was coming in. Where
I think so, right? Which was basically the third one is fully Oloroso, whereas this is what?
And it's
55
about 5.5 years old, so we're a lot older than what we were for the fans that tried fallow first crop, which would be the only similarity to it, really.
Yeah. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, it's quite different. You'll still get the Lochlea DNA through it.
Yeah.
But it's quite interesting to see how it's developed through the years.
Yeah.
Both beautiful drama, quite interesting to see.
Yeah. It's like what we were saying about Glenfiddich at the beginning, where after 18 it begins to like really change. It'll be so interesting to see like in like 7, 10, 15 years what happens to that Lochlea DNA, because there's just no way of being able to tell, is there?
Kind of leads us on to some of the more obvious questions, right? Which is, you know, how many crops are you going to do? Will we see an age statement? You know, what's the future hold?
Well, Jake, you've led us very, very elegantly on to potentially a quite saucy marketing point. We actually are finishing up the crop format just with the next release, which will be the ploughing third crop, which will be
third and final crop.
We're currently working
through,
ploughing will be, exactly. Ploughing will be the last one, which will be, well, the plan at the minute is March. Plans at Lochlea change rapidly and unpredictably.
Well, but also this is the beauty of us being independent, right? So, as we've said, like as a small team, we're constantly out and about seeing customers, like seeing how things are going in the market. We're originally meant to be doing 4 crops, right? So 4 years of the seasonal releases. But you know, we're a tiny team, and all our feedback is really kind of warranted, so to speak. So we've actually changed our release structure, and we're only going to be doing 3 crops. So third crop is our final crop of the seasonals, which is quite exciting for us. You know, it's
move on to something new.
Yeah, so next year is going to be quite an exciting year for us. There's a lot up our sleeves.
But what we're basically doing is coming up with our release structure that will carry us to age statement stock in a ongoing format. So the die-hard Lochlea fans amongst your audience, I'm sure they are there, would maybe have seen the 5-year-old earlier in the year. So, you know, that was a very small batch release. We intend fully in the future to be bringing to market 8, 10, 12, actually Lochlea are basically ring fenced, like these will be in the 30-year-old, which, to be perfectly honest, gives me a slight existential crisis whenever I think about it. However, they are there.
We'll be 60.
Yeah, I'll be. Yeah, if I get a ball for retirement, that'll be lovely. If anyone from Lochlea's listening, I know they're not. They're at the pub up the street.
We'll do a taste of this in 30 years. Hey,
walking sticks, dentures, and everything. Anyway, sorry, I digress. So what the plan is for the next kind of 2 to 3 years is kind of expanding our core range slightly. We're building off
we're going from
extensively.
1 to 4.
We're learning from what the information we've gained through the seasonal releases, and we're applying that to expand the core range. That will be coming late summer, and that will essentially carry us to proper age statements. Well, a very common path tread by younger distilleries is to get to about our age and then just release stuff at non-age statement kind of indefinitely. We've deliberately held back casks to form our older liquid. So we have a plan for the future that will provide us with enough aged liquid to bring age statements to market in time. But our kind of the most active and most interesting casks that we have at the minute is what we're releasing just now to kind of show people what we're doing, what the spirit can be, and also what we're about as a brand as we get to these older releases.
Fantastic. So I was just like, smacking my lips and probably putting some funny faces just because I was enjoying that whiskey so much. It's got like a really lovely texture. It's delicious.
Oh, so am I, but it's because of the weather up here. So bloody cold.
I think I've sort of covered all my my pressing questions that I like. I'm fangirling here. I love this stuff. But
he's speechless.
Yeah.
That's what humanizes a little bit, but you're still out of breath.
I think fruitcake and honey was a good descriptor, but like the creaminess of the barley, the texture. I was just say from that last sip I was taking, fantastic. Yeah, I really enjoy that dram. So thank you so much for joining us on your team night out for Christmas.
Some darts are waiting for you.
Yeah, go play some darts.
No, it's been a pleasure.
A way to play the worst game of darts in the history of darts.
Keep the hats though.
The hats might help.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, keep the hats for sure.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah. And Merry Christmas to all the people that are watching.
Yeah. And sorry you got two of us, but I couldn't leave them by himself.
I'm not allowed to be unsupervised, so.
Oh no, people were loving it. They were like, this is the first ever duo.
Oh really? Also, it's a double first ever. First ever during a staff night out and first ever duo.
Yeah. Making history everywhere you go.
No, I hope
fantastic.
Has a lovely Christmas and yeah, cheers.
You too.
Cheers, thank you.
That was fun. That was tremendous.
This is so great. Oh my god.
We've still got another one to go.
We do, but it's a bit of a flavour departure. So
yeah, we have been kind of in like cozy kind of autumnal, Christmas, wintry red wines and sherries and and now we're throwing in a curveball.
A curveball for the end of the night.
So shall we just
our
bring
fifth
Dougal in?
and final guest.
So, I mean, thank you for patiently waiting, Dougal. I think we're running wildly over time, really, but we're just enjoying it.
No, not always. It's also nice for me. Often, lots of people know in my line of work, and certainly I know kind of Patrick and Emma. We don't really get to listen to other people. We do tastings with ourselves and we do our own products. We don't really get to sit down and listen to other people talk about whiskey sometimes. So it's nice to sit down on a Thursday evening and do that.
Oh. And you've got your box, haven't you? So you've been sipping along.
I do, yeah, exactly. So it's nice for me to. I don't necessarily need an excuse to drink whiskey, but it's always good to have one.
Yeah, try some new stuff. Yeah, well, thank you so much for waiting. It is really good to have you. It would, be great to hear a bit about you before we get into the whiskey itself. Yeah,
of course. So like I said to Jake, I think it's either my third or my fourth time joining you guys, I think, with some Douglas Lane things.
When were you last here?
So, yeah, I think we'd had... I can't remember what we had in tasting last year. Maybe one of our Timber Species or Big Pete. We've definitely done a few of these.
Yeah, we've done some of the remarkable regional ones, and
we've done some single casks as well for sure. So.
Yeah, we had more exclusive Ben Rinner's Old Particular that we had you on for, so that was pretty cool. Yeah. Well, I've done my research tonight, Jess. I'm on it.
You really have.
It's always nice to come back. So I'm the global ambassador for Douglas Lane. Basically, that means I get to travel and talk Douglas Lane. So I'm just about 3 years with Douglas Lane now. Before that, I was with Beam Suntory as well. There's a few people that mentioned it through the evening. I appreciate now Suntory Global Spirits, or whatever the rebrand, the rename is. So I started life as a tour guide in Auchentoshan now 9 years ago. So yeah, coming up for my decade in whiskey, which will be fun. And yeah, I think kind of now I went from kind of the big corporation world, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, it was an amazing start in whiskey to work first with Auchentoshan and the rest of the Scotch portfolio, and then Japanese whiskey and Irish whiskey. It was like amazing as a starting point, and then kind of set me up for Douglas Lane as the complete other end of the spectrum. And we really do have a little bit of everything with Douglas Lane,
Yeah.
which is nice. It means every tasting I do is always different, which is always refreshing. And kind of what we're talking about this evening is now maybe it's becoming more and more what people know us for. Actually, the regional malts are becoming a really the bigger part of the business, if you like, certainly in terms of volume. So yeah, this is kind of the big focus, but they're fun, they're funky, they're a little bit different, and yeah, it's always nice to have something a little bit. We're pretty different to everything that's gone before tonight, I think.
Yeah, we were just saying that as well. I feel like this is a really interesting whiskey to finish on, and there's like a lot to unpack here. But so it'd be great to just a bit about the story of Douglas Lane, because no, am I getting confused? No. Anyway, I was going to say about your distilleries.
Well, we have distillery as well, so we do.
I know, and then I thought I was getting ahead of myself.
So I think first, if it's okay with you guys, I think the bottle deserves a look because it's one of my favorite bottles that we've done. And in terms of our tequila Mexican inspired bottling,
Really taking on those vibes. It's great.
All of our design work is done in-house, so everything is done in-house. Claire, head of our design, or head of creative, is her actual job title. She basically does all of our special editions, labels, etc. And this is all kind of her hand drawing stuff. And she is unbelievably talented and continues to win endless awards for her design work for us. But yeah, the Mexican Sugar Skull it's such a good looking bottle. So we're very pleased with it. So yeah, Douglas Lane. We are independent bottler, distiller, blender. We do really do every part of Scotch whisky, but we are 100% independent, still within the family. I'm not family. Dougal and Douglas often causes confusion for a lot of people. And it's similar names, and I get confused a lot. So the business started back in 1948. A gentleman called Fred Douglas Lane, which where their family name comes from. It gets a bit confusing because Fred's son is also called Fred, and again, this kind of layering system of confusion. So Fred Senior, original Fred, whatever you'd like to call him, he was basically the man on the ground in Scotland for a US-based company. So he was coming out of the Second World War, kind of, he was a pilot with an RAF, and he did a lot of different jobs and kind of sales roles, etc., and logistics roles, and he ended up working for this New York US-based company, and he was their man in Scotland that was sourcing liquid, putting together the recipe, and kind of organizing all the logistics around creating their one blended Scotch brand, which is called the King of Scots, which is a great name for blended whiskey in general. The King of Scots is a great name. And in 1948, the company offered him the chance to buy the rights to the brand. Basically, they'd run out of stock. They'd kind of run it all down. They were happy to kind of sell off the brand. They offered Fred the brand, the kind of rights to the name, rights to bottle it, 3 casks of the blend to kind of get him started. And for that kind of grand total, he paid £1, which is a good way to start a business in general. So 1948, he had a brand. He had the King of Scots blend, but was basically starting fresh. So Fred was going distillery to distillery to distillery. This is where we kind of operated on the smaller scale of getting enough stock together to create a batch of King of Scots and then ship that out. None of it was domestic. It was pretty much all going to a little bit to South America. We did very well in places like Panama and Venezuela early on, lots of Japan. So it was very much abroad. You wouldn't have ever really seen the King of Scots anywhere local. And so he built up enough stock to make the next batch. He would ship out the next batch and then again build up these relationships with the distilleries. He would typically be going in to tidy up some warehouses. So literally, do you have some 4 or 5-year-old malts that I could purchase? Just literally casks. So like maybe 3 or 4 casks with maybe some slightly older and just enough to build up the blend. And the big transition kind of happened by the time we get to the late 50s, we were doing filling contracts. So we were going to distilleries and we were, instead of taking odds and sods of cask, we were filling our own liquid into our own choice of casks. and therefore building up our own stocking there. So we would take 2,000-3,000 litres of new make spirit rather than aged stock. So already from the late 50s, we were kind of starting to get in control of our own destiny. 50s, 60s, 70s, you basically just saw this grow and grow and grow. So the King of Scots brand was, again, doing pretty well. It was a lot into the duty-free market. It was really where we had huge success. So it very much was an airport travel whiskey that you would have a lot of access to. And then, sorry, it's a long story to get to where we are today, but it makes sense when I get there. So yeah, building up the stock, building up this collection of whiskies. Fred Jr., Fred 2, our current chairman, if you like, joined the business in the early 70s. He'd already been brought into the business by his dad at the age of 14, anyway. I think it was his first business trip with his dad to South America selling whiskey. So kind of different world of them. I think he was brought along as the translator. So at the age of 14, traveling around South America, was selling Scotch whiskey. Fred's stories are both amazing and completely unrepeatable in public forum. So I can't disclose too much of this, but I can certainly say that Fred has lived many lives. So Fred came into the business in the kind of early 70s. His dad had kind of encouraged him to go out and gain a bit of experience. So he'd actually joined Major Hartley White at White Mackay. That was kind of where he made his start. So he kind of learned the art of blending at White Mackay. And then again, working with White Horse distillers as well. Following that, came into the family business with that experience. Ran the business up until 1984 when his dad passed away. Fred and his brother Stuart took the business forward. And then we, again, going all the way back to the beginning, we talked about this kind of growth and development, especially in the early 90s, of interest in single malt. And by the time we got to this stage, Douglas Lane as a company was sitting on this tremendous stock, and they started bottling things independently. So single cask, single malts, bottled under the Douglas Lane brand. And I've seen Fred's list of things that they were bottling, and it is unbelievable. It was mind-blowing stuff that they were bottling. Like, it was just Port Ellen, Rosebank, Brora, Rosebank, Port Ellen, you name it, we bottled it. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, one of our co-founders, Ben, tells a story where, like, the first time he met Fred was at a show, and he just gave him this enormous glass of Port Ellen, and he's like, I like this guy. Yeah.
he's good at winning friends, as Fred. Is a good place to be. So that was kind of our transition. So we went from kind of blender, like bulk spirit, into the world of independent bottling. That was like kind of right place, right time. And the independent bottling part became a huge, I think, the bigger part of the business, if you like. King of Scots was still very good for volume, but of course, independent bottling, things like this were very unique, very high value. And then jumping right the way through to 2009, there was the creation of Big Pete. I think lots of people, I imagine, will recognize Big Pete. So 2009, we were basically sitting on a super stock of Islay malts, and Fred started to play around with these malts, some of his favorites from the island, pull them together to create Big Pete. The idea was, how can we create something that's a little bit different? Again, blended malt, pure malt at the time, or vatted malt. It was kind of a very convoluted category. And again, I can talk about that when we get to the rest of them. But yeah, it's an interesting or challenging category just because of the word blended. So blended malt, we're taking this collection of single malts, but Fred was distilling Islay down into the essence of the flavors to expect. It was kind of this like classic Islay experience. So rather than relying on one distillery, one set of DNA, we could actually pull apart and play around with it. And this is the art of blending. So Big Pete, what started, again, and you think about what we're up against, things like Monkey Shoulder, etc. So these big, huge volume brands. So Big Pete is kind of still small batch even today, even though he is 25% of the whole of Douglas Lane. So it's a big part of what we do. But this was kind of idea of capturing the essence of the region, when the kind of final step for the company in 2013, Cara, third generation, Fred's, the first creation that she kind of took charge of, was giving Big Pete an opposite. And what was the opposite of Islay? It was Speyside. Big Pete is bourbon casking only. What is the opposite of that? Well, let's go big sherry casking. So we created our scallywag bottling. So we had Islay and Speyside, and that triggered this idea of doing the remarkable regional malts. So from 2013, each year we added a new region of Scotland. So we're taking in a full tour of Scottish whiskey flavors and profiles. We are fully aware that there's no longer a classic style, or at least there's no set style for each region. But what we have is, within our collection of whiskies, we can offer all the things to expect for Scotch whisky. Yes, there's some slight nods to this is the flavours you probably get from this region, but we're not saying it's the only flavours we'll get from this region. We are fully aware that you can go to Islay and go to Bruichladdich and get light, delicate, fruity whisky. In the same way you can come to the lowlands, you can get super heavy peated stuff in the lowlands. So we're fully aware of that, but it's this nice thing of being able to provide a collection of 6 whiskies, and we are, again, fully aware, before anyone likes to point out, that the islands that we're talking about today is not an official region, but we are feeling it deserves its point in the, or at least it deserves its moment in the sun, I guess.
Well, we have on the Master Malt site, we use islands as well, but just don't tell anyone.
It's with the success of places like Rassay, Torreveg, Harris, it is, I think we all feel it's inevitable, and they are so distinctly different from the Highland category. Again, this idea of lumping everything together as the Highlands, as this kind of big general area, even though you've got distilleries like Talisker, like Arran, like Jura, they're all totally unique in their own way. So we do feel like the Islands is deserving of its recognition. So I think that's going to come along. So this was the inspiration. So we went from blending for 75 years through independent bottling back to blending being a core part of the business. And Jess, you're right, in terms of just this year, we launched our own single malt as well, Cern. This is our tiny little Highland distillery. We're one of the smallest distilleries in Scotland. I believe we're third or fourth at the moment, I think. So we're producing a barrel a day is the size of Strathern. So that completed the kind of triangle of Scotch whisky production for us. So bottler, blender, and distiller. And that is a very long monologue of me saying we've got lots of different aspects of our business, but that's how we got here. That's how we get to creating stuff like this, is Fred Senior creating these blends back in the 40s and 50s.
Yeah, I mean, especially for something like independent bottling and blending in this way, it's got to be all about who you know, surely, like you've got to have all
it's amazing when you hear Fred talk about it. It's handshake deals that are still respected. With a lot of these places we don't have contracts with, it is just a case of, oh no, we work with them, that's it. And don't get me wrong, it kind of ebbs and flows, and we kind of very much see the cyclical nature of Scotch whisky, where sometimes we'll have more access than other times, and sometimes we'll be dealing with certain people and sometimes we won't. But there is very much this built on the platform of Fred and now Cara taking the business forward, that it's their personal relationships within whisky that allows us access to these. We operate almost like an extra marketing arm for these distilleries. If someone tries one of our single casks, they absolutely love it, they're far more likely to go back to the distillery and try something from the distillery. So it's not in their interest to try and pawn us off with bad casks. It's very much a symbiotic relationship that develops with an independent bottle like us. And we're kind of in the middle. We're not as old as the Cadenheads, the Gordon MacPhails, but we're definitely not new to the game.
Oh no, definitely not. In the remarkable
established favourite,
in this series, in the remarkable regional malts series, do you disclose the exact distilleries that the malts are from?
So some we do, some we don't. And this is purely down to contractual basis, basically. So certain distilleries we can only get access to if it's on the basis that we are not able to talk about it, which is fair enough. It's the balance act again. So something like Big Pete, we can talk about the distilleries there. On every bottle of Big Pete, on the front of that bottle, we list Kalila, Bowmore, Ardbeg, and Port Ellen. Again, it's a good name drop to add into your blended malt. And then essentially we're about basically 50-50. So Timmer's Beastie are Highlands. We typically name 5 of the distilleries, including our own Strathern, because that's now feeding into Timmer's Beastie, which again, this nice full circle moment of us getting to use our own single malt within the blended malt. The one we're sampling tonight, so our Rock Island, I mean, we kind of do, but we kind of don't. I think if you know whiskey, you can have a few educated guesses that what's going on in here. So we name the islands. So we give you Orkney, Arran, Jura, and Islay.
I wonder where those whiskies are from.
Exactly. And my diplomatic answer is, well, if it's Orkney, it's not Scapa, it's the other one. It's Jura, that's nice and easy. Arran, well, we've been making this a little bit longer than lags existed, so you can guess where the liquid is coming from. Islay could cause the most confusion, and I think a lot of people can guess, especially with the big nose of the Rock Island, that you can pick out which distillery we're working with there. Yeah, that's my very polished diplomatic answer when I'm being recorded. So
Yeah.
Definitely
Let's see
more.
shall we see what people are making of it, Jess?
Yes, let's.
So, well, I've got the comments on this one. So that we've got
I think I was about to dive in and do the whole thing.
yeah, well, Jonathan Charles has said very different here compared to the other ones this evening, and he's sort of picked out mint and cut grass, which I think some really spot on notes really. Peter Gilmore's like, oh yeah, into the peated whiskey, just took a sniff and lovely. Then Chris Randall's getting some orchard notes first, because it's not just all peat, of course. Steve Coleman Williams is saying about bonfires when he lived in Aberystwyth, and a few last people drinking from someone's random hip flask. We like a poetic tasting note here. So not so much a tasting note, but where my brain goes, which is we like these kind of memories.
Yeah, it's experiential. Exactly. It's Rock Island's a fun one. So Rock Island is often for us the most challenging to put together in terms of the consistency part. So we do all of these in small batches, and for us, when we say small batch, we do mean it. It's typically around 5,000 litre batches. So you might only get 10 to 12,000 bottles in a batch, and that'll be us globally releasing that. In the case of a limited edition you're sampling tonight, there's less than 2,000 bottles of this tequila cask finish in existence. So it is a very, very much a limited edition. So the typical kind of Rock Island, it's very much standing on a beach in Scotland. It's coastal, it's briny, you've got the kind of wind and rain coming at you. There's maybe a barbecue that's gone out somewhere nearby. It's not a big, intense islet. It's very much far more subtle maritime-y style. One of my favorite descriptions of it someone ever gave me was it's like Talisker and Old Pulteney had a baby, which I absolutely love. Because you've got that kind of slightly more herbaceous Talisker note, that kind of slight kelpie element to it. At the same time, you've got Pulteney's kind of mouth coating, oily style, a little bit more heavy in the profile. It's just this wonderful coastal style of whiskey, and again, this idea of Rock Island and this like rock pools feeling. That's what we're after. I think it's also one of these whiskies that's really unique for its salinity. It's quite rare to have a salty whiskey. This makes an unbelievably good margarita, as you can expect. It's really good. But yeah, so the tequila cask is a little bit of a wild card in here, I guess. So the typical Rock Island from us is bourbon barrel only, typically first and second fill bourbon barrels. This one, I'm sure a few people unbelievably, it's something that we have not as a challenge for a lot of our whiskey, but we're very much focused in on doing it the right way. So everything we produce is natural color, everything we do is non-chill filtered, everything is high alcohol, everything is 46% and up. The color for this is very, very pale. So this is a combination of second fill barrels, then the tequila casking coming through as well. So it's not a big dominant cask finish. This is never going to be a super dark kind of golden whiskey. It is quite pale, but it doesn't really matter about color. I think this is the whole point about whiskey, is we shouldn't be judging it from how it looks. It's how it knows and how it tastes. And you still get really big flavor even if it's a pale whiskey.
Well, absolutely. I'll try and pick out the ones tasting notes that aren't peat related, perhaps. We've got some citrus and vanilla. We've got caramel. People are getting apple strudel, green apple, and toffee. There's lots of notes coming through. Honey and like buttery biscuits, and there's plenty going on here, and it's very tasty.
Yeah, and it makes sense when you think about the kind of the makeup of it, because it's not all peated whiskey. It's a balance, if you like. And the peat, or at least one section of the peated whiskey we're working with, is not the big Isla style of peat. It's very much in the floral, sweeter side of peat. Jura has that kind of earthy thing going on. Arran is super tropical. And so we've got all these amazing kind of fruity elements and softer, smoky elements. And yes, the one from Isla does bring that kind of ashy bonfire. I think it was Steve that mentioned it. This is definitely where we see that come through, is definitely the Isla note coming through with that ashiness. But again, it's still really sweet forward. It's still really kind of fresh and citrusy. The choice to use tequila casks, I think you even noted it on your tasting notes that you handed out, it's a relatively new thing that we can officially work with in Scotch whisky. And so we're all still trying to feel out how it works best, what it complements. And certainly we felt 2 years ago we did a mezcal cask, and it worked really, really well with Rock Island, because again, it was just this kind of earthy, herbaceous style, a little bit more smoke. last year we worked with Plantery rum casks for Rock Island as well, and again that worked really well, kind of in a totally different form. But we wanted to revisit the kind of agave green herby style that is a complementary note to Rock Island. So Rock Island is already quite delicate and sweet, salty and interesting, but that kind of green herbaceous element to come back around, we were keen to work with it again.
Yeah. Do you think this whiskey might surprise people? Because I think a tequila cask might not put people off, but I think, it's not something people have tried. It's not something people have like maybe even heard of. And I feel like it doesn't, like when I first heard about tequila casks, I was like, oh, I don't know, like, because you're thinking of like full tequila and like full whiskey and those two flavors meeting, but obviously a cask finish is very different and it's very delicate.
Yeah.
So yeah, do you think people are like,
we're definitely it's a challenge when we see this year we've done loads of like stuff that we've never really worked with before, kind of some casks that are pretty unique in terms of we always have to kind of test out and see if it's going to work or not. It's the nice thing about the regional malts; it allows us to experiment to make sure it works. If it's terrible, then we can hide that away, but it doesn't really happen very often. It's I think one of our challenges with tequila is often people still associate it with being at school or being a teenager and drinking a lot of tequila and then making themselves sick. And I think this is just almost our access. I think obviously thanks to you guys yourselves at Master Malt, we're starting to see more access and more interest to good quality tequila as a sipping drink, as a long drink. It's not just a shot. And I think we're slowly changing that habit. And as we change that, people are more and more interested in, what does this bring to a whiskey? I mean, it's bourbon, it's barrel aged. You still get that kind of oaky vanilla notes coming through. It's not that dissimilar, if you like. Don't get me wrong, there's some variation here, but in essence, it's still a distilled spirit with lots of really interesting flavors and layers for us to play with.
Absolutely.
We are pretty
obviously those sort of memories of tequila when you're younger as well. A lot of that's sort of the sort of mixto tequilas, right, which aren't even made with 100% agave. They're quite a different base.
Destined for a headache the next morning.
Can be fantastic.
I think,
do you remember we had going back a while now, we had a Glen Murray that was rum agricole. And that was again one where you weren't sure if it was going to have like a massive influence, but they added just like a little like subtle edge that just added to it. And I think that's sort of reminded me of that here, where you just have that slight additional herbal edge.
And I think that's certainly where we see the cask finishes for us. Is we Douglas Lane, we definitely don't typically do really big cask influence. We typically are a little bit more subtle. Definitely with a single cask, we're only just starting to dip our toe into introducing some wine cask. We've just done a wine cask series this year with Old Particular. So we're only just starting to dip our toe into that, rather moving away from kind of traditional bourbon and sherry casking. The regional malts allow us to be a little bit more experimental, but we don't want to lose the essence of what makes Rock Island Rock Island. And Rock Island's that salinity, that maritime note. So we don't want a really big dominant cask influence. So it's not a super long finish. It's not like it's years in there. It's very much how can we complement Rock Island with a new addition to it.
Yeah, it's really lovely. And it's funny because like you smell it and you're like, oh, it's a smoky dram, but actually the lasting flavor is like, for me, like really like fruity sweet and like a bit mineral, like having like almost like your final sip, you almost don't know that you've drunk a whiskey with peat in it, for me. So
I often use Rock Island as my introduction to drinking peated Scotch whiskey.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
In fact,
it works really well
Mark
for that.
Backstage has nailed this, like a really good note as well. He's got custard cream biscuits, which I'm definitely getting. That's kind of just made a lot of sense to me from like a lot of stuff I've been getting. Fresh grass, so like greenness, and then like a bit of cigar smoke. So he's saying beautifully delicious. So yeah.
It's a really fun one as well in terms of, again, this is why I love working for Douglas Lane. I'm lucky in terms of getting to be involved and doing tasting notes and cast and things like that. But it's stuff like this. So we kind of have two options for how we produce this style of cask influence. So we can have the individual components all aging separately, and then they all individually finish in that cask, and then we blend together, versus what we did in this case, where we produced the classic Rock Island blend, and then we finished the blend together. So we can do different ways of influencing it. And last year's rum casking, 2 of the ingredients were rum cask finished, 2 of them weren't. So again, there's loads of ways for us to balance how intense the cask influence comes through. So it allows us to play around a lot, like with layering flavor in there. And it means that if we're like, oh, maybe it needs another another month or two finishing, we can put it back and we can play with it again. Or, oh, it needs a little bit more of this, a little bit more of that. Like the fun of the blending side is really interesting. The nice thing for Douglas Laying is every blend. So this year in January, Cara was stepping into the managing director role at Douglas Laying, but her dad is still in the business. Fred's still in the office Monday to Friday. You can't get him out. More a case of he's been in whiskey over 50 years. Why would you want to ever push someone like that out with his knowledge? But not a single blend for the regional malts will get bottled without Fred or Cara's approval. So every single drop of our liquid goes through them.
Wow.
Sure.
I love that. With this one as well, I know you mentioned that's obviously really good in margarita, but apart from that, which is the obvious choice, what other way would you mix this? What cocktail?
So our kind of favorite way of using Rock Island is actually what we dub a Bloody Joseph. So it's a Bloody Mary twist. So swap out your vodka and a Bloody Mary for something like this. Just adds an extra layer and spice and smoke. Works really, really well.
That is a good one, and not one I would have thought of. I love that.
So we kind of have, again, because of the regional malts things, and because I said it, I nod to it. Like blended malt is it's lacking in terms of education in general for just drinking Scotch whisky and how people view it, and they see that we're blended and they assume there's somehow a sacrifice of quality. We're still 100% single malts. We just happen to be using more than one, so there's no dilution of quality going on.
Or it's more.
It's funny, and there's amazing blends out there. So I think it's just this idea of blending as like a cheaper volume product, and yeah, there is bigger volume going on, but blended malt is kind of stuck in between because we have the word blended attached to it. So there's this kind of stigma around it. But I think people are still reluctant to mix with it and still reluctant to introduce it to cocktails and use it in different ways. And as far as we see it, cocktails should, and I always think they again got lost in the 90s or 80s and 90s, I guess, of cheap ways to get drunk, when really it should have been something super premium and deserves super premium ingredients. So what is more premium than Scotch whisky? It's the way you should go. And there's all these flavors you get to play with, which is really interesting. But yeah, if you're tomorrow morning, if anyone's got a sore head, a Rock Island Bloody Joseph works really, really well.
If they have any left.
Yes, it's the dangers of doing small batches is once it's gone, it's gone. But we're always working on something fun.
Yeah, exactly.
I think just meant in their drams if people are.
True.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I meant just because it's such a small amount. But also,
to buy a bottle from a very, very beautifully designed bottle from the 416.
That is, an extra reason to buy a full bottle when they look like that, for sure. I was trying to see if we got any more notes coming through, but actually everyone's just talking about which whiskies they like. They've moved on already.
Well, yeah, and the fact that Bloody Mary sounds great. Yeah.
Yeah, again, it's a very good recovery drink for sure.
Amazing. Well, I feel like this concludes
a rather mega evening of whiskey tasting.
A rather mega evening with a recommendation for a hangover drink. Although sip, don't gulp responsibly.
Should we bring Mark back in?
Yes, let's do that.
So I think Alan was in America and had to run off somewhere, and obviously the Lochlea team were in the middle of their Christmas party, bless them. So I think we've lost a couple, but Mark's still with us and been sipping along and commenting.
Yes, I am indeed. It's been a lovely night. I hate to say it, but I have finished off all of the little samples that we've experienced tonight. So I had to go and then get my own Bladnoch, peated Bladnoch, because we finished on a peated tequila cask finish. I was like, well, what could go better than a peated Bladnoch? So there we are. That's how I'm finishing off my night.
First world problems of a whiskey ambassador when you have to I'll have to reach back and find another bottle in the cupboard.
I mean, you can see what I've got just sitting behind me. So I've got one or two to choose from.
Just a couple.
It's all tasting stock, I promise.
Yeah, Steve's saying, oh wait, hold on. Alexander's saying, amazing night, happy Christmas all. Steve's saying, as ever, I've bloody loved the Christmas extravaganza, but it's not quite over yet. We do have the question, as someone's pointing out, which is, we like to, our members like to say, what their favourites from the box are each month. So we always promise, you won't be offended.
Yeah.
It's usually Andy, isn't it, who takes great relish in asking this question, like, what's your
I
favourite
also
from
love
the
it.
box? You also like, oh, sorry, I should have let you do it.
No, that's okay. I feel like I'm always like too happy about it,
But while they're deliberating, what we usually talk about, different drinks, perhaps from different brands that we're enjoying at the moment. But also, I guess the real question: what are you guys going to drink over Christmas? Is the obvious question.
Mark, if you got, I do have an answer to this, but it's.
I mean, so well for myself, I'll be going back to my mum and dad's for Christmas, and my dad, he does love lots of Speyside sherry casked whiskies, and I know that he's got a lot of Glenfarclas in his whiskey cabinet. And even though it's technically not a Speyside, he does also love a Glendronach as well. So I know that I'll probably be dipping into some of those over the Christmas period. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to those. And also I'm big into port finishes, and I am really, really enjoying the Glendronach Portwood. It's beautiful.
Nice.
Super
Good
festive.
answer. My version is my dad's not a whiskey drinker at all, so I had to convert my mum to being a whiskey drinker when I started in whiskey. So my mum learned to love whiskey at 70, which is great. But her kind of first kind of turning stone moment for her was the Arran Amarone cask, and so my mum and dad met on Arran, and therefore lots of family connection to Arran. So there'll always be some Arrans on the go, but also a case of Arran Gold has also been purchased in advance of Christmas. As for if anyone has not been introduced to Arran Gold, that is their cream liqueur from the distillery. Essentially, their Bailey's equivalent made with Arran malt is unbelievably good. So I cannot recommend enough.
Nice. Well, I think I've already talked about chestnut Manhattans, haven't I? Which are like
what have you?
Well, yeah, on a previous foreign sip. Perhaps that was wrong with Andy.
Oh my god! Tell me more.
I'll have to post the recipe on Twitter or something for people to refer to later. But yeah, chestnut Manhattans. That's the way to go.
That's so funny because my thing is a chocolate hibiscus Manhattan.
Okay, so yeah, we're kind of in the same the same idea there.
Manhattans for Christmas.
And then also I'll be over with my partner's family from Boxing Day, and so her stepdad's got like a cupboard full of whiskey, which is like this, and it's like her mum's pestering me like, help him out, help drink some, have some, and there's some cracking stuff in there. There's like old like indie like Highland Park and Kalila, but like some really special old bottles. It's
like, oh, if I have to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a real chore. So yeah, I'll dip in some of that as well as some cocktails. Let's have a look how we're doing.
Okay,
I know Steve Howdy Doody was saying how much he enjoyed the Lochlea. We've got Real Boingers saying Bladnoch with Lochlea and Rock Island very close behind as well. We've got Rock Island with Pexman, Simon as well, Rock Island followed by Bladnoch. Chris is saying what a great evening with amazing guests. I think my favourite is the Rock Island. Happy Christmas all. David Walcock, yeah, Rock Island. I also enjoyed the Glenfiddich. Both are in my basket. Kevin B, Rock Island. Steve Coleman Williams is saying that I'm going to say it wrong now, aren't I? Carpathian. I've got it. I've obviously didn't. He was saying, doesn't anyone do geography earlier? I was like, oh man, I missed that lesson. That was embarrassing. So yeah, I would say this one, yeah. Another strong box, pour and sip. Need a herbal tea before bedtime now. Some top drams around. I've got another vote for Lochlea. Yeah, chestnut Manhattan sound good. Yeah.
What about mine?
For a few of them, but especially yours too. So there you go. We've ended up with the right two people to hear all that live.
That's it. Glad to hear it.
Is it? I mean, I don't like to think it's because we're in the room, but I don't really mind. It's fine.
They'll definitely just say what they think. Don't worry.
They're not being polite. Don't worry.
But yeah, this has been great fun, and I don't know if we knew what time we wanted to end, but I think we'll wildly later than that. So thank you so much for sticking with us.
Just looking at the time, it's 2 hours 44 minutes. We've done well to be last that amount of time with
Really
6
proud.
whiskies.
It's a
5
good
whiskies. 5. I'm on 6. I'm
Some
on
of
the
us.
6th here.
Well, yeah, thank you so much, both of you. Thank you, Jess,
problem, guys.
for joining us again, of course.
Jake.
And
Thank you very
Merry
much.
Christmas to everyone else.
Guys,
Merry
have a good
Christmas,
Christmas.
everyone.
Happy Christmas. Cheers.
Merry Christmas and all the best for 2025. Cheers, guys. Or
Good, guys.
Sláinte.